it does detach too, which is really nice.
6 o'clock. I'm calling this meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. Ursula, will you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight. Sue, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sounds good. All right, first up, approval of minutes. Everybody have an opportunity to look those over?
Mhm.
Any questions, changes, corrections? No? Anybody willing to make a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ursula. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Scott. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? None. Any public comment? None. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Sue, how do you vote?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, public comment. Do I have anybody here for public comment tonight? No? I'll skip over that part with my rules and regulations. Okay, our work study topic tonight, PCBE. Matt?
This is going to be fun. We have a great group of teachers here, and they're going to share in this presentation. This is our opportunity to give an update on where we've been the last couple of years, where we are right now, and then where we're going. And you get to participate tonight. So we're gonna model the model a little bit. We won't separate you or make you get up and move around like we did last time, make you uncomfortable.
We appreciate it.
Pete, you want to go to the next slide? So our learning targets for tonight are on the board. By the end of this meeting, we hope you can answer in the affirmative to those I can statements. And this is what you have in front of you. So what we'd like to do is give you a little bit of time to take a look at this rubric and just get a sense for where you are with your understanding. On the left-hand side in the blue are those same learning targets that were just up there. And then the rubric on the side is where you would self-report on where you think you are with those questions, those prompting questions.
And as you go on, can you...
I was gonna say, you gotta like put them in people's hands. Nobody will ever stand up and grab them. Grab somebody with that.
Matt, do you wanna say where you are right
Nope.
now, or is that okay? That's it.
Nope, just hang on to it for now. I wanted to give you a couple minutes to read it.
It is truly self-reflection.
Yes. And you'll have an opportunity at the very end to revisit that, to see where you are at the end of this.
I can be real personalized.
You will.
Okay.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
We'll be available for reteach if you need it. All right, you want to go? All right, so we're going to tell a little bit of a story here, going back in time, so that we can ground ourselves on how we got to where we currently are. It wasn't by accident. Article 10 of the Montana Constitution outlines our responsibility to fully develop the potential of each child. And through that, and looking at that, that's where the transformational learning grant came from. Go ahead, Pete. The grant, as you remember, is kind of a lottery system. So we filled out the application. We knew this was the vision of what we wanted to do. We submitted it. It's not literal ping pong balls, but they get, a random number gets drawn, and our number is drawn. And if you're an elementary district and your number gets drawn, your high school district gets drawn. We don't know which one was drawn, but we were able to draw the lottery for both of our districts, which provides one-time only grant funding. At the time, we were also as a district going through this revisioning process of vision, mission, and strategic plan. And the energy around that was, we want a strategic plan that's simple, that we can understand, that doesn't just collect dust on a shelf, that's actionable. So this is where we started. It was a really good plan because we're still following it. I think we have some work to do with the next step of it, defining some measurable objectives to each one of these areas. But the transformational learning grant went hand in hand with the work we were doing. Then we started. So, we started with just celebrating what's right. We had conversations with our staff about, what's great in your school that you want to celebrate right now? What is something that you designed? And then it's just kind of lack of maintenance. It's gone a little bit out of kilter and it just needs a tune up, not an overhaul, but we want to get it back to running the way we designed it to run. And then what are we doing that we could abandon? But most of that energy was, let's celebrate what's right already and let's build from the good work that's already been done. Then we took our administrators through a pretty thorough process. We did 6 leadership sessions to where we just wanted to ground our team on a common language. We traveled to a couple different states and saw what schools look like when they were 5 years down the road from where we wanted to go. Linked on here is a resource website to where we archived everything that we did, and so that our principals then could go back when they were teaching this to their staff, they had something to start from. That was a big challenge for us as a central office because we tried to model the model, and so when we were talking about Hattie strategies, we tried to implement that in our training with our principals. But some really good work, and that was, yeah. And then at the end of that, it culminated with saying, gosh, PCBE, transformational learning, this is a big topic. What are the 4 most important things that we can do next year that will lay the foundation for our staff that we can build on from there? And so our administrative team came up with the big 4, and we'll talk through those in a bit. And then now we're at this really fun phase. So in the elementary school, last year we started doing this work on priority standards. And I think for a lot of our staff, it's like, where is this going? How does this connect? Well, this year we were able to finalize that list and have a first draft of those vertically aligned. And we've referred to them as they're more of like a constitution than the 10 commandments because they can be amendable. But we have something to start. So some buildings are taking that first draft of priority standards, they're working down into learning progressions. You've seen some of that on your site tours. And that really moves the needle on how we change what instruction looks like based on priority standards. We've partnered with Knowledge Works this year to do an opportunity analysis. Basically, they visit a couple schools and they come in and say, this is what you're doing that's really aligned. Here's probably your next step that you would get the most bang for your buck if you leaned into these types of activities. And then probably most exciting is we've rolled out a boot camp. And so we just created this with some support from some of the folks that we've made friendships with across the country. But the idea was, can we create a professional learning 2-hour experience that captures the big picture of everything we're trying to do? I would say that the boot camp's gotten better as they go along, but man, it's hard to pack it into 2.5 hours. We've, I don't know how many versions of that we created, but we have it down to about a 2.5-hour training, but you need every minute of it. But from boot camp, this universal grounding, so if regardless of where you teach or what you teach in our district, you've got the same information. Once you've gone through boot camp, the next step for the people that want to is they can join a launch team. And what a launch team does is they focus on something a little bit more specific, and then they travel to a site, see how it's being implemented, the thing that they're interested in, but they're also exposed to the bigger picture of all of the moving parts that are associated with this type of learning environment. Then when they come back, they start to unpack it as a team. Our first official launch team is traveling right now. So they left, I think, Sunday night. You're going to hear some from some teachers tonight, and they've traveled on a launch team, but they kind of got the sneak peek. We had some administrators travel, we had some instructional coaches travel, and then we had some of our lead teachers and our keep mentors traveled just because we wanted them, one step ahead. Our first round of teachers are traveling right now. So that's where we are. We're gonna be living in this cycle of boot camp, launch teams, boot camp, launch teams, probably for the next 2 or 3 years, just by the time we get through all of our staff. But it's just a really exciting time to, be a part of that. We keep going back to our why. This one was more reflective of my why. I think, transformational learning, PCB, is less about anything new. It's just about connecting all of the parts to what really good education looks like. It's connecting 20 years worth of really good research and innovation into one thing. Go ahead, Pete. These are some of the things we hear when we roll out boot camps or we start sharing these ideas of what we're taking on. This is what Kettle Moraine, how they've defined it. They've been doing this work for about 20 years, and they've boiled it down to a pretty simple statement. That brings us to this year. This is our main focus. Will probably continue to be our main focus next year. And you're going to hear from a couple groups. And our first group to elaborate on some of these ideas is our boot camp group from Megan and Carrie. Microphone. Well, they can hear you on. So they can hear you online.
Oh, sure. We've got Sue online, so she won't be able to hear you without the mic.
Right behind you.
Oh. Thank you. You bet.
Press hold until
Will you go back a slide for a second?
Okay, all right. I'm Megan Kopis. I'm the reading specialist here at Flathead High School, and I have taught only at Flathead for 17 years now. And it's been really exciting to be a part of. It felt like a privilege and a lot of empowerment as the first group of teachers. As Keep Teams, we mentor all of the new teachers that come into our district, whether they're brand new to teaching or whether they're veterans to teaching, but they're coming into our district. We kind of say, we're bringing them online and we're really teaching them how we do things, the culture of expertise that we believe in Kalispell Public Schools. So right now, of course, a big part of that is understanding what is PCBE. Personalized and it's competency-based. And you'll hear more about that. But as teachers, we were saying the same thing, like, what is the acronym? I just heard people behind me say, what? I don't know, what is it? Personalized, right? So not totally individualized for every single student, but lots of, just a lot more student choice. So it's more personalized per student. The emphasis really is on students, but it's also exciting for teachers. Brings more joy to the classroom. So we want to be able to pass that on to new teachers coming into our district. Maybe they're even coming from districts where you get a totally scripted curriculum. Everybody has to be on page 25 on this date. You should all be saying the exact same thing to your room full of students. And we're given a lot of freedom to be creative and use our expertise. It's really exciting to be in. Mostly, I'm just here to say thank you for the opportunity.
And I was also given the opportunity to travel with that first team, but I've also been in education for a very long time. And they'll say that the pendulum swings in education, and it does. And along these 29 years of my teaching, there's a lot of great teaching with me. Right now, I feel like PCB is like it's really great stuff. And so my purpose, being with the Keep team, is really, Anthony and I are able to work with those second-year teachers. And one of the things that we hear is that, gosh, we were never told that, or what even is PCB? They're so overwhelmed with just teaching the first year when they have them. And then when we come back, we try to help them with contracts and evaluation, and we try to help them now with the PCB, because we really want all of our brand new teachers to be on board as well. This is great stuff, and really what we can do is learn from one another. And so that was the power of what we got to do do by going to Arizona is we got to go into these classrooms, and God love those teachers. They had just come back from Christmas break, and they allowed us to come into their classrooms, and what we saw was phenomenal. But what I was even more encouraged about is it was a lot of what we're doing right now already in our district. Even though we're just beginning, I feel like we're well into a really good thing. So our purpose, again, here, the two of us tonight, is going to keep this going. And we will make sure that all of the new teachers are onboarded with the boot camp. And then, as we sat down with Pete last summer, we just said, this is really important that everybody is on board and everybody hears the same.
I've spoken with a lot of teachers who have not attended the boot camp yet. I have attended the boot camp, traveled to Arizona, and seen other schools put this into action. It's really impressive to see from a very young age up to high school how the students explain what PCBE is, how they're evaluating their own skills and their progressions. It just really helps them take charge of their learning. But then I was able to attend as kind of a co-lead on a boot camp and hear other teachers get that spark of, oh, now I have more clarity as to what we're trying to accomplish here. And then got to travel around our own schools within Kalispell and see a lot of the same strategies that I saw in Arizona. So I just want you guys to know that we have teachers who are doing a lot of great things, and it is really exciting to make sure we're all just consistent and supporting each other.
Want to go back one? So we, not that you guys have to, but we kind of tagged this under your guys' umbrella. Did you want to speak to, this is one of our power slides from that boot camp.
I would talk to the personalized part of this because, again, as an instructor who's done this for a long, long time, teachers get overwhelmed with the fact that, what am I going to have to write an IEP for every single student in my class? And the answer is no. But the answer is that we're going to give kids some opportunity to say, gosh, I want to learn about, for example, in my classroom, in the 5th grade group that we just did, we were learning about state capitals that are areas of the nation. And they got to choose which states they'd like to learn more about. They got to choose the ways that they were going to tell us how they learned and what they learned. And things can be very simple. They don't have to be as complex. And once they see these things in action in other people's classrooms and through the PCBE boot camp, they realize that personalized really means, what does a kid need to be successful? Does a kid need to show that they are successful? When we give them those opportunities, it just opens many, many doors. The high-impact instructional strategies are what a lot of the teachers are really focusing on. We're just thinking about what is the best way to deliver that instruction. Obviously, it's not just one way. So what we've done is we've looked at all different ways that we can reach every child. And sometimes it's not the right way. We have to find another one. And again, I'm going to back up and say, this has been the best type of teaching for a very long time. And now being allowed to do what we know is best is just
And then in terms of competency-based, that is focused on skills, right? So it's the student showing their skills. It could be in whole child social emotional development. As an English teacher, that often comes into play when they're discussing, right? So we're practicing some debate strategies. We're practicing listening to each other. We're practicing group collaborative communication. You guys on the board know that's probably the hardest type to do. When you have to come to agreement and consensus together and then move forward with making decisions. So we've been practicing these in our curriculum for a long time, but now we have tools where we're putting the power in the students' hands. They have rubrics based on standards, based on skills. They know this is what, this is the skill I'm practicing. This is where I need to do to show mastery. And they're often evaluating themselves along their progression. It's differentiated in terms of when and how students show mastery. A little bit of what Carrie talked about. But it can work for all students on any end of the spectrum, right? So I teach students who are not proficient in reading at a high school level. So I'm taking students at one level and saying, okay, we're going to work on these skills. Each student, some are working on comprehension strategies, others are working on still decoding multi-syllable words. So we have all the skills. The students kind of know where they are, which ones they're working on. They're evaluating themselves, and then in reading, it means, they're in my class for the semester, but if they haven't achieved mastery, if they're still not grade level proficient readers, they'll probably take another semester of reading, because the goal is that they are successful in. I have a student who, I'm my own kid, that I'm just now registering for high school for the first time, and it's really exciting, for her to think about she has a lot of goals, and she's thinking, okay, I want to do the full ID program at Flathead High School, but I also am really interested in the medical field, and I want to do the biomed program. And is there room to do everything I want to and take advantage of everything Flathead has to offer? And now, with the possibility of flexible learning, maybe not based on seat time, but being able to demonstrate your mastery sometimes independently even, or in a variety of ways, she probably can do it all if she wants to. That motivation, it makes her a lot more excited about it. That gives you some examples.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks all for your time.
Cool, thank you
Oh,
very much.
you're not done.
Hold on, we've got the whole presentation. As soon as we're,
Oh, no, I've got to tackle Carrie with this question to reflect back on her time with Joe and Brenda and your training with creative independence through student-owned strategies. How do you identify the similarities and differences?
Oh, yeah, I feel like I'm home. I feel like I'm home. I really have watched that pendulum swing, and I loved Evergreen School, I loved teaching there, but the pendulum swung, and it went way to the other end. And when I started, Jack was talking about when I very first began teaching, there were so many opportunities for students, and we were meeting them where they were, and we were finding their best ways to succeed. And in the middle of all this, we ended up at something called Reading First. And that was when we were given a book and told exactly what to say, how to say it. The kids sat there for 90 minutes, and it didn't matter that they were second graders, they couldn't sit that long. And it was heartbreaking. And so I did it for the 3 years. I committed to those 3 years. I committed to those children, but I left, and it broke my heart. And I came back to School District 5, and I've been here now for 16 years, that I feel like I'm home. I really just am so excited about the teaching and learning that is going on everywhere I look.
So it's similar to the way you started, okay?
All the way up.
Thank you.
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the nice things about boot camp is it gives this big, broad overview, and this slide has resonated with a lot of the teachers in boot camp, because it breaks down when they're hearing personalized competency-based education in a very simplistic form. The personalized speaks to the instruction and how we're tailoring instruction to individual students without an individualized plan. Personalized means students taking agency, students knowing, and then they're tracking the progress, like you guys are doing tonight. And then the competency-based side is the curriculum side. How are we organizing it? How are we putting that curriculum in student-friendly language so that they can own it? One of the other big four was we adopted this before the state mandated it, but it's aligned to a school coming together and a school defining what is the most important things that we should teach kids. We use this as an onboarding activity to help staffs understand the why of this work. And when you get folks around the table talking about what is most important, they think of the big objectives of being in a school. It's interesting what comes out. So we're looking forward to hearing what our team shares from what came out from a couple of our schools.
Now?
Am I on now? Perfect. Okay, I'm Alex Cummings, assistant principal over at Kalispell Middle School. My partner here in crime, Jody Barber, principal at Linderman. I volunteered to go first because I've seen Jody's part of this presentation, and it is very, very good. So feel free to stop me if you have any questions. Just kind of a quick overview of how we got here. So on one of our first trips down to South Carolina, in the school district that we went to, that district, pretty much everywhere we went, on the walls, in each classroom, in the hallways, they had developed their profile of a graduate. And within Lexington 3, in South Carolina, they had been doing this work, as Matt said, for about 5 years prior, so a ton of work. But basically, this is kind of one of those places where we started, as a K-12 admin team within the district. So part of our work was when we sat down, and did this just as a K-12 admin team, we kind of let this go organically. And the question was sort of posed, like, as administrators, you know, what would you like to see, in the students that we graduate through our district, through our schools? And what's interesting, what you'll see as you sort of look through a couple of examples of these is they're all very similar in what we as individuals wanted as graduates of our district. So that's kind of where we started, and then it was one of the first things we did at the middle school. If you go to the next slide, Pete, this is ours right here. Jody's on the left over at Linderman. But one of the first activities we did with our staff, and again, we wanted this as an admin team to sort of happen organically, is we tossed this out to our staff. And we said, hey, as educators, you know, and a lot of our educators are parents in this district as well. You know, as educators, as parents, as community members, what do you want to see, you know, in a graduate? What are the traits? And this is ours, right? So our big goal that we wanted to see, that we came up with as a staff, or that our staff came up with on their own, was, you know, we want people who are learners. We want to develop people, not only as students, but as people as well. We want people that can communicate, work as a team, as Megan talked about earlier. You know, collaborative learning, huge in our society. Critical thinking, problem solving. And then just those life skills, right? We want to build not only great students, but we want great people that go on to be leaders in our community and great parents. So that's where we started with this, and this is sort of, you know, our building's thoughts of what it looks like to be a graduate within our district. And as of right now, you know, I think the work that we've done on this, or really our teachers have done on this, kind of has laid the foundation of, like, where we want to go, what we're looking for, sort of to get everybody lined out. And this is still, you know, just a piece in the cog of, you know, our plan as we move forward. But I think, you know, it aligns to what our goals are as a district. And I think that was important work, because, you know, teachers in general sometimes, again, they do have a hard time sometimes changing, or, hey, why are we messing with this? We have a good thing going, which is all true. We have a great school. We've had a great school for a long time. But I think this particular activity was great for our staff, because it kind of brought everybody together, took some time to, you know, really evaluate where we're at and kind of align, you know, what our goals were. So that's kind of where we started. I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Barber here. She brought all sorts of examples. So go ahead, Ms. Jody.
I'm all about big sticky notes. So I'm going to just walk you through our process a little bit. I remember when we did this as an admin team the very first time, and we had our little bubbles and we're doing it, and I was like, ooh, like, I don't have anything on mine that says I want them to be good in math, and I want them to be able to reach college level, and I was like, I wanted them to be happy and lifelong learners, and I want them to be independent and to advocate for themselves, and I was like, this is like the school counselor in me coming out for kids, and maybe not the educator in there. But it was really interesting as we all went around how we were all very similar. So we started this last spring, and I sent out a little Google survey to all of my students. And I said, what do you want to be when you are a graduate? What are the traits and qualities that you feel are important for you? And they went through, came up with lots of things. I sent it out to my staff. They came up with lots of things, very similar. Then this fall, we're very lucky at Linderman that we meet with all of our parents and students individually before school starts. So
The teachers had individual conversations with parents, and we gave them a Google form, and it was, what do you want for your students, for your kids, when they graduate? So we gather all of that information, and then I wanted my staff to revisit again. So sometimes I like to be creative, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. So Linderman is, we are the Phoenix. And so I made puzzles, made the puzzle pieces, put them in a bag, threw them, mixed them all up, threw them on a table, and I said, staff, remember last spring when we talked about what we want for our students? I want you to think, what not only do you want for your students, but what do you want for your own kids? And so they each took a couple puzzle pieces, and then they wrote just one word on the back. This is where it didn't work so good, because then I put hodgepodge, modge podge, whatever it is on the back, and then I smeared all my stuff, so that was the not good part of it. But then we went through, and it was, I wanted them to be creative, control of their life, success, have community, belonging. So all these pieces that we put together, and the staff did not know what the puzzles were that I put together, so then I made them do teamwork, because there were two puzzles, and they had to figure out how then, or what they were making by putting this together, and how all of these words are going to make up us, our profile of a graduate of the Phoenix. So then our next activity was breaking into teams. I used popsicle sticks because I like to break up teams, and they get to create randomly. And they were to take all of the traits from parents, from students, from staff, and we had it all on a big Excel spreadsheet that our Aspire students all cut out all the words. And then that's what we have back here, is that in their teams, they had to come up with what was their profile of a graduate. They needed to organize, put together in groups, create some sort of visual, and as you can tell, they're all a little bit different, but yet the main categories are kind of the same. Whatever this Join the Galaxy one, I always wonder, but in the middle of that one is love, so we want them all to be nice. And from that, then my leadership went from there to what we've created here is, this is still in a draft form, but it is our profile of a graduate, where we want them to be independent, resilient, communication, be a good citizen, job skills, and have life skills, and it's broken down a little bit more. So that was our process and how we got to there. Questions? I don't know if we can ask questions, because there's a lot to do.
Well, I thought we would wait till the end, so.
Okay.
So thank you, Jody. Alex.
I wasn't here for those instructions.
Right? Go to the, go backwards.
We ready for the next one? Hi, everybody. So I'm just, I'm gonna actually pass the softball over to my two friends and colleagues, Shemaya and Brooke, if you guys wanna come up here, especially teachers in the district, who actually got to travel on a team. And Matt talked a little bit about that. So they're gonna share some experience with you. Before we do, I just wanted to, go back to the main slide, please.
That was my direction.
So really quick, you don't even have to click on the launch team process yet. I'll just talk about it. It's there if you want more details. But essentially, as Matt said, folks have to attend boot camp to just kind of get this foundational knowledge. And then they fill out a Google form at the end that says, like, I'm really interested in this one or two aspects of PCBE. And so they sign up to be a part of the launch team. And the launch team is really a commitment to practice. It's saying, like, we're going to do some pre-work together as a group. We're going to go visit a school. Then we're going to come back and we're going to collaborate on it, reflect on it, talk about it, and put some things in practice. Right now, we have 20 staff in Lexington, South Carolina. We have another 18 staff next month going to Santa Cruz, Arizona to visit schools, and then in April, 20 staff. So all in all, we'll have almost 60 folks going on launch teams over the course of 90 days, which is really, really exciting work. But the most exciting part is to see what these guys reflected on and then came back and did after traveling to Arizona. So I'm going to pass it over to them to share. And Pete, I think if you just click on the image, you get their slide.
I'm Shemaya Bennett. I'm a resource teacher over at Hedges. So we went to Santa Cruz Valley School District, and they are a pretty incredible school district that is doing PCPE. They've been doing it for about 7 years. Something that really stuck with us is that they're a 90-90-90 school district. So that means that they have 97% of their students that are Spanish speakers. 90% were under the poverty line, yet they still have 94% of their students graduating. This is really powerful and just showing that once everyone is working together and really has that shared vision and collective advocacy, which is hard for me to say, that you can really overcome barriers and get over some really big challenges. I was talking to an assistant principal down there, and she was telling me that every day there are so many kids that actually come over from Mexico, because they're, I don't know, like 15 minutes from the border. So there's all these kids that the parents will be at the border at 5 a.m. They cross at that time so that sometimes it takes 2 hours, sometimes it takes 15 minutes. Once they get to school, there's families that actually sit in their cars because they don't know how long they're going to be sitting there. They really value their education. So the families that sit in the car, they don't have money to have their gas run or the car running, but they would sit and huddle until school started every morning. There's also families that they would bring their kids, and when they got there, but it really showed how much those families are valuing the education that they're getting in. That was really powerful.
I am Brooke Peterman, special educator at Rankin Elementary School. So when I came back from our time in Arizona, and for my brain to kind of understand what was going on, I kind of split it into like big ideas of PCD and kind of smaller ideas that we could get going right away. I'm going to start with some big ideas. I've been talking to my teammates at school about this, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get here for an elementary school. So some big ideas that we're talking about is like a whole child roster, which is very exciting. But it's shifting from like a one teacher, one classroom mindset to like a roster of grade level students with the expertise of multiple teachers, special educators, community members, instructional coaches, and everybody could kind of team for a group of children. And so it helps with a deeper personalized learning for all. The rosters, an example I keep giving to people is if there's 100 kids in 4th grade at Rankin, there's 3 teachers, and essentially they're teaming up to see what's best for those kids instead of just having one teacher with a group of 27 kids and kind of trying to find what's best for all of them. An example I like to give is if one of the teachers, I'm thinking of my 4th grade team at Rankin, one of the teachers who's a good friend of mine is an excellent math instructor. She loves to teach math. And so she could kind of take on the role of a math instructor while the other teachers who might not be as comfortable teaching math could kind of take on the role of reading, or they could do intervention groups or writing. And so just giving kind of the power back to teachers to teach what they love and kind of split up the tasks between each other. It also helps coming from my side of the special education and kind of integrating kids back into their classrooms, because all kids deserve an opportunity to be in their classrooms, and that this is just a great way to do that. And then later on, I'll show you specific examples of how we're doing that. But also integrating more project-based learning, giving students a choice of how they want to show learning, switching up groups all the time. So some groups could be working on a project, while some kids are getting that more intensive instruction in an area and just giving them more choice. I'm going to have Shemaya talk about climate and culture.
So when I went down to Arizona, culture was a big focus. I didn't realize it when I signed up for my classes, but everything was about culture. I really think that it's the foundation for everything else. You don't have a positive culture, nothing else functions very well. So we had a keynote speaker that was fantastic, Steve Bowler, and he talked about the 7-week challenge. And so I came back and I was like, we're going to do it, Hedges. I didn't really give him a choice. So I'll kind of just go over what our climate is, or what are the challenges. So on the first week, everybody was challenged with making a connection with 3 students that they didn't know. It could be as simple as just saying, hey, what's your name? But it's at least making connections for all of our students. The next week is complimenting kicks, because everybody loves shoes, and so you just comment on a kid's shoes. Like, oh, look at your Jordans, those are awesome. And then you're, again, giving the opportunity for some sort of connection. Currently, we're in week 3, which is nice outfit, so this is really fun because you can be like, hey, look at your outfit. Can you give me a little twirl, do your best fashion walk, and the kids just light up, and they strut around and they're so excited. Actually, teachers have been also doing this to each other, which has been really fun, and that's been a really good change in our climate as well. The next week is eye contact, not creepy eye contact, but a nice smile, looking at the student's eyes, so actually just modeling some good social skills. And then if the kids are like, why are you looking at me? Nothing, you just make me smile. And so I've kind of helped equip some of the teachers with different things to say if we have some snarky students. The next week is my favorite. I've actually just been doing this because it's fun. So you point at a student and then they're always like, but me? And then you're like, yeah. And the kids light up and they're like, oh yeah, I got this. The following week is joke of the day. And this, I've got links to the teachers to be able to just tell a really cheesy dad joke. And then I've actually had my own children start going and telling the adult jokes because they just love it. So again, just building those opportunities for connection. There's so many students that don't have enough connections as well. The last week is marker board, and our school counselor she jumped straight to week 7. She's still doing everything else. But she's been walking around the school every morning. She's got a whiteboard marker or board, and she says something different. On Friday, it said Happy Thursday, which really threw all of the stuff. But like, I don't know, have a good day, Buttercup. Just different things. And then it's causing everybody to pause and look at her and have some communication, which has been really powerful. So,
Yeah, Laura.
So that was just changing kind of the overall feel in our building, which has been a really positive thing so far. But then also that culture really comes back to our student agency as well. So I was really struck when we were in Arizona. I walked into a classroom and the kids were like, let me show you everything that we know. And they showed me the standards tracker. They could tell me on like greatest common factor what the standard was, which that part didn't matter. But then they were like, the first time I got a 2, but I was able to like do some practice, and I decided that I wanted to go do some further assessments on it, do more practice, and then they got up to a 4. And he's like, on this one, I was at a 3, I'm on a scale of 1 to 4. And I was good with a 3. That was a really hard thing for me. A 3 I was really proud of. And it made me realize how much ownership these kids had over their grades. And then it kind of coincided, I don't know, it made me think about my own children. So I've got 3 little girls. When their report cards came home, I had to explain their report cards to them. I don't want to have to do that. I want my children to come home every trimester or whenever and say, look at all these things that I know how to do. I want my kids to explain their grades, because it shouldn't be a surprise to them what they're learning. So I really wanted to apply this to what my teaching, and being in special education, I'm working with kids doing IEPs all the time. And I try to really provide opportunities for like student input within my IEPs, but I felt like I needed to do more to connect it. So with that whole grade-based thing, I decided that I wanted to have a clear awareness of their IEP goals. I started conferencing with all of my students over their IEPs, which I conference ahead of time, but now I have more of a purpose. So the students are doing a goal sheet, which you can kind of see there. So we're going over each of their goals and then talking about the pathway to get to their goals. But they need to work on like their reading fluency. We're talking about what are some different strategies we can get to do that. What are some things that we're doing every day that's going to help us get there? What are some extra things that we need to do? And we talk about that all of our goals are different for all the students in my classroom. They all have their own data binders. They're all working at their own level on their own things. But I want them to be understanding what they're actually working for, why they're in my room, what their goals are. It's going to be a foundational skill for life, being able to set goals and identify these are the clear ways that we're going to get there. And it's been really awesome just even to have that extra time to connect with my students, but developing some independence for them.
On this next slide, I'll show you how we've kind of collaborated between special ed and gen ed to make a math time fit for all of our students. So when I think about big things and small things, this is one of the smaller things, just quick things that we implemented right when we got back from Arizona. Again, one of my good friends was a 4th grade teacher at Rankin. I was like, hey, let's do this, let's try it out, let's show other people that we can easily get this done. And so her and I collaborated to make choice menu boards. And so you'll see these pictures on here, maybe, of a couple choice menu boards. I pulled all of my kiddos, just because we're not quite ready to have like the whole roster of kids and collaborating with the whole team. We're just not quite there. And so her and I did it together. And so I have 6 kids with, math IEP goals in the 4th grade right now, ranging from kindergarten to 4th grade that just kind of need a little help with like word problems. I pulled them into her classroom. So we have about 30 to 32 kids in this class with 2 of us. It's an hour a day. So each kid every week gets a new choice menu board. You'll see these ones are colored. So we have a half hour at the beginning of our math time where kids are independently working on their choice menu board. Right now we're working on fractions, so they have different levels of fractions on theirs. My student who is working closer to like a kindergarten level has a choice menu board of just addition and subtraction and things she can do with her calculator, because we're teaching her how to use the tool for later on in life. And so while they are working on these personalized menu boards, the teacher and I are taking small groups of kids that need reteach, pre-teach, or enrichment. And so these menu boards are completely at levels they can be independent. They don't need us for the menu boards. But when they get done with the task, they color in the box. So you'll see some of them are orange, some are green. Orange means I did this task, but it was challenging. Green means this task was like right on. For me, I could do it by myself. There is a red option, which means I could not get this done on my own without you. And so then Hope and I, as the other teacher that I work with, we quickly look at them at the end of the day or the end of the week and say, like, we need to change this menu board. For this kiddo next week, like, the word problems were too hard for them. The IXLs were too hard for them, and just making sure it's meeting them where they're at. There's always a review, always a bonus, always a task of what we're learning right now. So you'll notice these are fractions on this one. And then over on the wall, quickly at the end of the day, we look at their independent work and we say, okay, tomorrow, these 10 kids need a review on adding fractions with common denominators. So the kids, when they come into math every day, they already know they're going to a small group with us. They meet us at the door. We take them to their little areas. The other kids are working on their menu boards. And then we give a whole group lesson about a half hour in, and then we break off into independent work time. And then at the end of that independent work time, we look at their work. We decide, like, okay, no, everybody got that. We don't need to do a small group. We're doing an enrichment tomorrow. Or these kids need to go all the way back to division. I see on their review sheets we're missing division. We're going to poll those 7 kids for 20 minutes tomorrow. Their names are on the board. Again, they always know walking into class where they're going. So that's just one way that we've implemented. We're on week 4 right now. So far, I'd give it like a 10 out of 10. So we asked the kiddos how they felt about it, because we told them, like, this is for you. We want math to be accessible to all of you. And I said, raise your hand if you have something that needs to be changed. One kid raised his hand, and he said, I really love the structure, is the word that he used, but the math was too hard. And so then we just did a reteaching on how we color our menu boards to let us know that they need to change that for next.
So before we move on, I just want to pause for a second and share a couple things. First, when we start talking about boot camps and launch teams and travel, I feel like I always need to remind people, especially where we are in our current budget development process, this is a one-time only grant. And the purpose of the grant is to make this change. So it's to change the system that you're working under. And what a great investment. I can't think of a better investment for that grant and those dollars to invest in our teachers. We talk all the time about loose and tight. So our goal as an administrative team is to identify the target and then get our teachers understanding what the guardrails are, and then just cut them loose. The people closest to our challenges in our schools are gonna have, most of the time, the best solutions to all of those challenges. And what a great group of teachers that, you know, we've invested just a little bit, and we've gotten such a huge return as far as what they've brought back to their colleagues, what they've brought back to their classrooms. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you for sharing. The last part that I want to share is, you know, obviously we have some curriculum work, we have all of that to do, but we also have this, the side of this work is how do we scale it up? How do we share what we're doing? How does the communication structure look like? And so we just piloted an idea. We got a couple groups together, got an elementary group of teachers together, and with a middle school staff member, and we toured some elementary schools to see what was happening in pockets. And then the middle school was gracious enough to host us for lunch, and we just debriefed. What did we see? And then we asked them some challenging questions, like, what does this look like if we scale it up and we start introducing this to parents when we're just exploring it? We haven't, you know, we don't have classrooms that are implementing everything, but we have classrooms that are implementing some things. And when is the right time to start introducing this to parents, introducing it to kids? So just got their feedback. Just some things we heard from our teachers. We did the same thing with a high school group, by the way. We took a group of high school teachers and they toured the same elementary schools, or different elementary schools, but the same concept. And then we brought them together. We got very similar feedback. It was, you know, this was a good experience. The high school teachers were saying, we learned from the elementary teachers. If elementary kids can have agency and be really clear about what it is they're expected to know, then surely my high school kids can do these same things. Not just enjoying a beautiful lunch at the middle school. It was Mardi Gras week, and so we had some Cajun-style food with cupcakes with little babies in them. Yeah, jambalaya. And next thing coming, and I'll kick this one over to Pete.
Yes.
Yep.
So one of the things that we've been working on and putting together is a summit for the summer to try to work with some of our other partners across, I guess, the United States. So Knowledge Works, School Services of Montana. We have some folks, so we've really studied Kettle Moraine. We were able to get the assistant superintendent to come to the conference, but this was actually, you know, just really a brainchild is, you know, how are we able to bring all of these people together to further dive into some of this work that we're doing. And so it's kind of twofold, and we want to be able to have it set up so, hey, we're bringing some of our partners in to be able to do this, but we also want it, as you can see tonight, is, you know, we try to put the people who work closest to it in front of it. And so that's a part of it is to be able to get our teachers to be able to present, to have some of our partners present. The other thing is to invite all of our partner schools. So I think Matt has talked about this quite a bit, you know, with our partner schools is, you know, instead of getting 2 or 3 years down the road saying, oh, hey, here's what we're doing, if you guys want to do this, is we want to include them from, you know, from the beginning. We want to invite our partner schools. We want to invite other people, you know, throughout the state who are starting to explore this, because, you know, I think we're probably, you know, our district is probably, you know, way ahead of the, you know, the rest of the state, but we're also way behind if you take a look at some of the things that are going, you know, around the nation as far as just, you know, moving through this. Although you heard from our staff that, hey, we have a lot of pockets and we're doing a lot of this, but now we're just bringing it under, you know, one umbrella. So, you know, we're really excited about bringing in this conference to be able to work with our partner schools, to be able to ask them, hey, do you guys want to get on board? And then, you know, we can learn from each other, and as we move, you know, through this PCBE. And because, as you know, half of our students come from our partner schools, and we think, you know, it's really important to have them on board. You know, so not only do we have, you know, our staff a part of this conference and our partners, and then we've also asked Eliza Sorda-Thomas to help us. She's also asked to go on one of the launch teams with us, and we work really closely with her, and we work at Edgerton right now. She's working with learning progressions, and so she's jumping on board with us. And so, you know, it's important, hey, not only do we look, you know, across the nation on what are some of the best schools doing, but it's also, we want to be able to showcase, you know, what we're doing right here in our own district, get other people involved so that we can continue to move forward.
Sarah, before we kick it back to questions for the staff, do you want to introduce Wyatt?
Oh, I missed that.
I think, gosh, we heard so much good stuff. It's been like an absolute honor behind the scenes to be able to see not only the state of the team.
That wasn't part of the test.
Hey, the good thing about this is I probably won't be driving any longer, so it's really not my first day. So this is working out for everybody.
There was an ongoing joke. I was like, I need to get there 15 minutes early to do a tech check. And they were like, no, we don't. What if this audio fail? No, we got it. We tested and the test was actually okay.
This is a P fail.
Is it gonna, with the microphones on, we're gonna have
Should I turn it back on? Don't press play yet, Pete. Just hold your horses. Hands are too quiet. Oh, there you go.
Go ahead.
Mic on?
Your mic's gonna be on, yes.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, I just have to honor the work, not just of the people in the, people who presented, which is absolutely amazing, and it's every single school, it's a really cool part. But like I look out and see our principals here and Lynn and KEA leadership, we did this in partnership with everybody. So it was, instructional leaders, KEA leaders, teacher leaders, and students. And so we just wanted to close out with Wyatt. Wyatt is a student at Edgerton Elementary. As a lot of the teachers spoke about tonight, what does it look like to personalize learning and empower kids? Wyatt's a great example of this, and I thought about our mission. If we were to actually tie all of this work back to our mission, and we really believe in offering those personalized opportunities to empower kids, what does it look like? And so I just wanted to share 2 minutes of what it looks like through a student lens. And then after that, you guys will have a chance to just kind of reflect back on these sheets, and hopefully we captured the learning targets in the right way tonight.
Right.
There goes me a copy if it doesn't work.
Are both of those mics on?
Both of these mics are off, but I wonder if these mics are picking
It's
up.
not that, it's,
They're not
he's
on.
They're not
presenting online.
Yeah.
Not you, I know.
We're having technical difficulties. That's the concept.
Oh, so I haven't missed anything.
And I was so excited.
If Wyatt wasn't so cute, we wouldn't go through all this, but you'll appreciate it.
Watson, and how old are you? 8 years old. I'm about to be 9 in like a week or so. Oh, that's awesome. So on Tuesday, a couple days ago, we came and observed you, and you were talking about your progressions in math. And I was so excited, and I said, I want to record you, and you said, okay, right? me about what you're learning in math skills.
So, I took a test on Tuesday to see if I made it to chapter 5. So, when I first started, I wasn't really good at subtraction at all. But then when I took a test at the start, life changed because I needed to read, but then I started to learn a lot. And I took tests every time I felt like I could do it, and I had confidence almost every time. And so when I made it to room 4, to about 4, and then I looked on this and I thought, this is getting easy now, so I tried to go for 5 on Tuesday, and they saw me doing my test, and they were like, whoa, this is really hard math. What are you doing? And I taught them, and they, said, holy cow, that's really good. And I taught them a lot of stuff about my math stuff, and that struggling could really help you learn instead of doing all the easy stuff.
So you were telling the grown-ups in your class about how you got to be so smart in math, and you said you had to struggle, and then,
Struggling really helped.
yeah, why do you think so?
Because, if you do all the easy stuff, it's, so easy, it's not helping your brain grow.
Mm-hmm.
But if you struggle, the hard stuff will kind of help you a little bit. You'll get better at it over time.
So when Miss Gilbert gets you here and you start,
We could watch Wyatt all day, but that's what we wanted to show you. It's interesting, that's what student agency looks like. So it's clear to Wyatt what he's expected to know and be able to do, and then he's taken ownership for, this is what I need to do, this is what I need to lean into, this is the work I'm doing. Beat your back. And you guys are back, because the last thing we have is Q&A for folks that presented. They're a wealth of information and passion, so I'd encourage you to ask the questions if you have them. But then we just wanted you to reflect, and part of this is for us, how did we do it in clarifying this is big work for us, and you guys are the tip of the spear in our community for communicating what we're doing with the community, so we want this to be clear for you guys.
Anybody?
A question?
Jen?
I was just gonna go back to some of the earlier slides to figure out exactly where we were on the journey and what we have left. Right, I'm trying to answer question 1 from self-reflection, and, I was wondering if you could help me out with that, Matt. Seems like we went out and we've learned some stuff and we're implementing it. More work to be done.
Yeah, good question. So slide 8 is where we kind of presented this scope of where we've been and where we're going. Oh, thanks. I think this is the slide you're referring to.
Yep, I got it.
We'll live in this land right now of where we are with the boot camps. Sarah, we have had five boot camps, and roughly what percentage of our staff already signed up?
100 staff have volunteered.
So one of the way we run boot camp right now is it's after school, and so it's not a mandatory training. It's if you want to go, and we've done that by design. So we want to meet people when they're ready for this and not shove it down anybody's throat. But I'm frankly pretty surprised that we've had so many staff sign up in this short window of time. We have one more coming up. Sarah and I get to host that one together. I'm really excited about it. We've actually sent out a couple personal invites to some staff that we want to see there. But that we'll live in that land of boot camp and then launch teams, and just the reality of that structure of launch teams. We kind of created the system, and so we're dependent on these schools from across the country. They don't just necessarily look for people to host. We've recognized them or found them as schools that are further along than us. And so we have to build that connection with the school, tell them what we're looking for, ask them if it's okay, and then all the logistics that go behind the scenes with all of that. Just to give credit where credit's due, Sarah's done like 99% of the lifting on the launch teams and the coordination between Knowledge Works, the host site, and then Pete's done about 99% of the lifting on the what's coming up with that Doris Mountain Summit. That's not listed on here as what's coming this year, but that's a big piece of us scaling up this work. Like Pete said, you know, we want to scale this up in our valley, but we also want to scale it up in the state. And when you hear people say, we're doing this in pockets, we want to celebrate our teachers and then build those connections so people can come and see it in action. Another thing that's happening behind the scenes right now is hopefully a future partnership with GCU, where we can look at Grand Canyon University. They've been pretty creative and out of the box on how they provide professional development and college courses. And so we're hopefully working with them to build a partnership so that they can design college courses for our teachers to a asynchronous curriculum, but then we can embed on-site support. So if a teacher is studying something related to PCBE, they can get the support in a college class that would work for their renewal, or it could work towards their master's or whatever. But then if they wanted to see it in practice, we could connect those learning objectives of what they're studying to an actual classroom in our district. I think we're a really good model in the Flathead Valley, just with our staff, to be able to foster that would probably generate enough energy to make it worthwhile for GCU. But if you think of the whole Flathead Valley, right, that could be a really powerful way to scale up this work. So we got some things coming, we got some ideas that we're working on, but the big idea of seeing it in action, bringing it back, unpacking it, implementing it with your peers. I just love what Brooke was sharing about, you know, going there, getting excited about something, and then coming back and just not sitting on it. And Shemaya, what you're doing at Hedges as well, like, they're just going for it as soon as they get back. So that's really good energy.
So I think I have a pretty good understanding conceptually of what's going on, but a few things just to make sure that in my head what it's being called is what it is. So the Big Four development was just like the 4 main goals to start with in the beginning. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. The boot camps are what we do within the district to get people kind of trained for what's going on. The launch teams are the ones that go elsewhere?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And it was on that last slide there, it was like KW. What's the KW?
Knowledge Works.
Knowledge Works.
I promise I didn't bait Ursula in with this, but that was the layout here.
Okay, perfect. And the summit that's happening would be kind of like a boot camp, but it could be like beyond the district? Is that correct, or is it something different than that?
The summit?
Yeah.
The summit will have sessions, professional development sessions, that will tie to all of the main components of what PCBE is.
So more than, like, different than a boot camp, something, if people have been to the boot camp, they might still want to go to the summit.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And it'll be a combination of folks from outside the district, outside the state, that will be presenting at sessions, as well as some of our staff hopefully co-leading some of those sessions. This is year one of hopefully many years
Right.
of hosting this event. And as we grow in our capacity and our knowledge about this, we will take over and host more and more.
Okay.
But we recognize that right now, we probably need some partnership, and we need to bring some people from the outside that are a little bit further down the road than us.
And is it being hosted? Is that Doris Mountain where it's being hosted?
Michelle was gracious enough to open up FHS, so we're gonna
Okay.
host it right here.
Okay, so why is it called Doris Mountain?
Well, that's because Pete's really stubborn in the name calling, and that's all we're gonna. Pete named
Okay.
it. Pete named it.
Why'd you name it that, Pete?
You'll have to come to the Doris Mountain Summit, find out.
Okay, so I have one more question then.
Great
and
questions,
this is
though.
more for, all of the staff that has had a chance to travel to some of these other schools. My big question as a person that hasn't done it, and I assume, like, you probably get this from other staff, is there anything that these districts have resource-wise that we don't have, or do we have what we need to make this happen? Like, do they have some kind of crazy funding or some kind of crazy facilities, or is it mostly just, like, do we have everything we need besides obviously the training, the time, all of that?
Going to, we traveled to Arizona, and it was that was kind of my perception too, was, and sometimes we talk about that in our IB program as well. Well, sure, if you're at like a boarding school and your students live there and they're, they're all super motivated. That's what was exciting, was to see it being a 90-90-90 school. And actually what I thought was really cool was they did not feel like they had accomplished yet what they wanted to. They had, over 90% graduation rate, but then their next goal was, well, what's next for students, right? We want to make sure they have the next level of certification, entry into a career, going on to college, and so they did not feel like their job was done. But no, they didn't have, it felt very similar to what our district would feel like, walking through their schools, they didn't have some amazing resources. I mean, their community is living in poverty, right? So more than 90% of their students are below the poverty line. So they don't have, they're not passing massive levies, they're not pulling from the big tax base. I think what I appreciate as a teacher is that it seems like the district is investing in us as teachers. Like, we're the resources. Why the launch teams are so important, because we see it, we implement it, but then we're the ones pushing our colleagues to go to the next.
I'll add real quick. So one thing that keeps coming up, I've given a longer version of this presentation to like the Rankin staff, and then last week we had the wheel training where all the elementary came together and they could pick sessions. The biggest thing that keeps coming up is time, like when are we gonna have the time to plan this? And so, like I chose at Rankin to jump in on a math thing, and it does take a lot of time for me to collaborate with the teacher, and that's just one subject. And so when we went to Arizona, they had early releases just like us, but their early releases were fully dedicated. And I think that is just something that people keep bringing up, is like, this is great, but when are we gonna have time to do it? So if I could think of a resource, it would kind of be around, and I know it gets into like contract stuff and all that kind of stuff, but, like, when are we gonna have time? Whether that's early releases, whether it's opportunities in the summer to earn TIR, or pay, or time after school, but we are gonna need time to collaborate, especially in a situation where I'm a special education teacher. I want to collaborate with a gen ed teacher, our preps and the PLCs don't align. I don't have, so, that is.
In your travels, did you have an opportunity to experience one of their, like, boot camps? Do they do boot camps, or are they kind of all past that, and you just kind of modeled your own boot camp?
Their conference is really like what the Doris Mountain Summit is going to be. So I think they must have probably had something together on there, but we didn't see it. I mean, they're 7 years into it, and how far are we into it?
The first year, it was really cool how it was, I mean, ours was a combination. We were really lucky as a group, because it was one day of a conference and one day of visiting class. We did get both.
And then this question is coming just because I got the opportunity to go to a K-8 counselor meeting not too long ago. And they would also love to do a little travel to see what counselors are doing in these PCBE schools, because they, as you're doing like whole child learning, and so I just want to say, I'm just going to put my 2 cents in there that I'm supportive of that.
We had, go ahead.
I've got their back. We've got counselors going in all 3 lunch days. And our non-service consultant coordinator.
Yeah, they talked about, there was a few of them there that were talking about the trips that they're going to go on, but as a whole team, it would be kind of cool, because then they could talk, like, really delve into counselors.
All they gotta do is attend boot camp and they're.
What are we doing for the teachers that have not jumped on board for PCBE? How are we integrating that with our schools and stuff like that? If this is gonna be school-wide, what about the ones that are resisting? Are there?
Yeah, I think that, you know, a lot of the work that we do is facilitating a change process. And I think the first way that we're doing this is celebrating the excitement of what this looks like. When we go, where we've gone, I've asked teachers that are implementing this work, does this bring more joy to teaching and learning? And are you having better results? And the answer every time has been yes. So then when you get in front of a group of staff members that aren't as excited about it as the folks that are in this room, the question is, do you want more joy? And do you want more, be more effective? And I think approaching it from that lens is a positive lens to onboard people. And then when we get into the realities of, well, why haven't you signed up for a boot camp yet? The things that I'm hearing is that it hasn't worked out for their schedule yet. And I think we need to recognize in an organization as big as we are, that we're gonna have people that are in different phases of their career, and we're gonna have people that are in different phases of their personal life, and they're gonna have different levels of bandwidth. We want to take the approach, I want to take the approach of not ramming something down somebody's throat, and instead letting them feel the excitement that's happening around them and join that group. That said, there is going to be a time when we're a couple of years down the road where this is the mechanism. So if we know that the best teaching and learning happens when you're really clear with what you're asking kids to know and be able to do, and you're presenting material in instructional methods that are proven to be best practice, that there's an expectation that you're doing that. You know, there is this time sensitivity to the work that we do. We're entrusted with everybody's most prized possession, with their kids. And you know, we may, as educators, get a couple years to teach third grade or fifth grade or ninth grade, but kids only get 1 year in those classes. So there is this intensity to, we want to be gentle, but we also know that this is the right work to do, and so we're all going to get there.
Can I add to that? So, I mean, that's what you heard from, you know, Megan and Carrie, and, you know, it's just that we want to embed this into, you know, our culture, and that's why it's so important to have, you know, all of our key leaders on that, and to be able to train up our new staff as we're coming in. And then you also have to realize too, you know, that with the staff, we're only 6 months into this too. You know, like Matt talked about, you know, some might not have the bandwidth. Some are in the fast lane. We've talked about that, a slow lane and a fast lane. There's just no stopping. You know, just, we don't want you to get in the way, but for some, it'll take a little bit more time.
More follow-up. How are we measuring the success of this program? Is there some tool, because I know certain schools use different measurements to assess reading and then assessing math, and are we seeing improvements? Have we seen improvements for the past 6 months?
No, I don't think we'd be in a spot where we can measure anything at this point. I think what we do have right now is all of the artifacts that support we're doing the right work. Recently, a very well-known and celebrated teacher at the middle school sent me an article that was talking about the positive effects of student achievement based on the model that we're pursuing. And it had a, Lynn, what was that, a 3-time multiplier?
Yeah.
Basically saying, if you're doing this work and you're really clear with what you expect kids to know and be able to do, and students have the processes in place, so it's like you heard Wyatt talk about, here's where I am, and then I didn't quite get it, so I went back and relearned it, and learning became the most important thing, not the time in which he got there. Mm-hmm. And then he reassessed why it's not being graded on the learning process, why it's being graded or required to reach competency. In school systems that do that, they're more successful on any measurement, any academic measurement. We're not to that point because we're not implementing what we're doing, but we're definitely down the road. If you had asked me a year ago, where would we be right now, I wouldn't have given us this much credit. We are in the year that we have on paper as exploring. So just feeling it out, what is this work? But what we're already seeing is, before we've even sent teachers anywhere, based on what their administrators have told them and kind of the excitement they've shared, they've started implementing things. Now that people are actually going and seeing things, it's just speeding up pretty quick. Our actual problem is the reverse. We've had conversations like, can we get enough launch teams organized to fulfill the need and the requests from our teachers? Can we outrun this avalanche of teachers requesting more and more of the work we're doing? So it's a good problem, but it is a problem. The last thing I want to mention is I gave you this book. This isn't the end-all be-all. It's just how knowledge works, breaks this down. This is kind of their equivalent of the Big Four. It doesn't totally align with ours, but it's pretty close. But this is what they refer to as the 12 conditions. So they say schools across the country that are doing this work well are doing these 12 things well. And if you flip through the pages, it'll say, this is what you could expect if you were just scratching the surface. This would be what it would look like if you were exploring it, you're in there, and then this is what it looks like in those categories if you're actually implementing the work. This is what it actually looks like. Great resource, should be on your coffee tables like it is mine, versus just some casual reading.
And whose knowledge works?
Knowledge Works, there's two main institutes in the country that are the think tanks for this work. Knowledge Works, they influence legislators. They meet and talk about if you're designing a system from a legislative level and you want to see your state make the most academic growth, these are the things you do, so they advise on that level. But then they also do the work they're doing with us, and they do consulting work.
Okay.
And so they say, as leaders, here's how you can frame up some of this work. And then we're actually using them in some unique ways, and I think pushing them in a healthy way of saying, we want to do boot camp, which isn't like a standard issue thing. We want to do launch teams, which isn't a standard issue thing. But we think it's good for our people. So we're using them to help make some of those connections. And then the other group, if you're interested in a Google search, is the Aurora Institute. They're the other main organization that does a lot of that legislative advocacy. They don't do as much of or any that I know of the consulting work that we've tapped into.
Okay.
Krista, to answer your question, it'll probably take 10 years.
Right.
And the only analogy we have is technology. There were people 10 to 15 years ago in the district that jumped on it and went with it, and many others had resistance, and right now there's less resistance. There's only, I don't know how many, there's a lot fewer now that are not implementing it, or they're gradually doing bits and pieces, and it's becoming more prevalent. But yeah, it's gonna take at least 10 years.
I'll take the bet and cut the timeline in half.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, there's people in this room, there's early indicators of like database success. From Edgerton, we've been doing really intentional math skills work. Super unusual for our student climate survey data. In our last couple of special ed elementary research. Math is the scenario that Brooke mentioned in terms of math. They did a pre-unit and post-assessment, and all but one student showed mastery or material on that unit from the time they came. I think we have some really great indicators.
Oh, I don't doubt that. I just think of Sean Kelly and how far ahead he was, and how nobody would even, he'd throw ropes out and nobody would touch the ropes.
The last thing I'll say is I just want to give a shout out to the principals. We went through a training last year, really grounded ourselves in this work, kicked around some hard questions, and I hope our staff is giving them abundant grace. They're leading work that I think they know is the right work, but there's no specific formula on how to roll it out and how to roll it out with their staff. So when they look at the work that's ahead, they also have to take into consideration the personalities that are on their staff, where their staff is with some of these concepts. And they're just doing a really good job of finding the sweet spot with their group of staff and what they think their staff needs. So when I get in front of teachers and they, sometimes, well, we didn't hear it exactly like that from our principal, I'm like, well, just give them a little grace, because they're delivering this message also for the first time, and they're doing a really good job.
I really want to thank you guys for coming and speaking to us tonight. And I mean, I've attended a boot camp before, and this was just even better. Boot camp was great to give me a foundation, but the stuff you guys are talking about, seeing it hands-on, being able to see it in action and bring it back to our district to implement it,
really important. I'm so excited we have this grant that we're able to send you to do this. And I'm really looking forward to letting everybody have that experience. So then you can share with them, they can come back and share with you what they have seen. And I'm really thrilled with what we hear. Even when we're in the classes, we got to see, what's his name today? Devin. We were at Elrod today, Deacon, and Deacon got to show us his folder full of his ICANN statements, and he explained it to us, and we've seen a few others. We've been at Hedges, and it's exciting. It's exciting to see these kids showing us they're taking ownership of their learning, and this is how we create lifelong learners, and you guys are doing a great job. Thank you all for being here tonight.
You're welcome to stay for the regular business, but this is the time to make a quick exit if you want.
Run.
Not Jack. Okay. He's going to visit in the outside. Okay. Next. Business items. We've got declaration of a high school trustee vacancy. Chris, do you want to start with this? First, before we start with any of this, I just want to throw out for everybody who's here. Chris will explain we had a trustee who has resigned, and I just want to throw out that this position isn't easy. We all know this. We're all in this position. We are volunteering our time, and life compiles on top of everything we're trying to do here for this district and serving on this board, and we sign up for a 3-year term where we give everything we can for 3 years volunteering to this community. And I know things come up in our personal lives and families, and sometimes we can't fulfill those 3 years, but I just want to recognize that Lloyd was here for 2 years, and he gave us everything he had, and I really, really appreciate it. So we will be moving forward. Now we have a vacant seat available that we are going to have to open up. Chris?
Yeah, so the board just has to officially take action to declare that seat vacant. You have a 60-day window in which to appoint an interim trustee for that position, and then that position will be added to our ballot on the May election. So we'll elect 2 high school trustees this May election as opposed to the 1, and the only difference will be this Summers Lakeside position will just be a 1-year term so that the cycle stays consistent. We don't want to end up in a cycle where we're nominating up to what could be a quorum in a given election, so it's important to preserve that. So that's pretty much the long and short of it.
We're going to have to appoint someone before the election cycle. And then...
Right, so the governance has a timeline, right? And then if we didn't do it within 60 days, the county superintendent would do it on our behalf. But there's a process in place already.
So governance met a couple weeks ago, and we've decided, so tonight we will publicly state that this position is vacant. Tomorrow it will be, well, as of right now, it's opened up to the public. It'll go live tomorrow, though, in the newspaper and then on our website. So any applicants that are living in Lakeside, Summers, Kyla District, they're welcome to apply for the position. You just have to write in a letter of intent. And then we will be holding interviews on March 11th with a hiring committee. And then we will offer the position, and then that following board meeting will be on the 12th of March, and we will vote on being that person on the board. That will give that individual enough time to sign up for the election if they choose. They'll run the election cycle, and as long as nobody runs against them, they'll hold the position for a year.
And I guess this March 11th meeting, what meeting, board, committee, what is it, and where, and when?
So governance, so right, the committee will just consist of 3 trustees, and we'll just hold interviews for whoever applies for the position, and then we will bring that person to the board the following night.
The board as a whole get to consider the pool of applicants, or just the recommendation from the government?
Recommendation from the governance committee.
So if we as a board member have interest, we would have to appear as public, not for public comment.
I'm not sure, Scott?
Actually, I think knowledge on this, he's been through it before.
A few times, yeah.
Can you speak on it a little bit more than, because we have.
Yeah, you know, and I think we set it up so governance, and that's how we've done it several ways, but ultimately, the board chairs made a committee, the governance committee, they make a recommendation, and usually, you know, we go with the recommendation because we trust our fellow trustees who did the work and did the interviews.
Understood, but I guess I'm just, as a, I don't know, I mean, this is one of our colleagues that all of us are gonna work with, and I don't wanna say it's akin to hiring a superintendent, but it kind of feels that way. Maybe I'm just so new to this that I don't quite understand the impact of it, but.
Yes.
Okay, well, if we're getting legal advice to do it this way, I can always fall back on it.
I know in the past it had been the governance committee had been the hiring committee. Is that how it will be this time?
Pretty much. So, it's Scott and myself. Honestly, I don't really have a committee put together at the moment, so I was thinking 3 board members.
Mm-hmm.
As of right now, I mean, I'd like to see who even applies.
Mm-hmm.
We may have 5 applicants, we might not have any applicants, I don't know. We're going step by step, we're just trying to make sure that we're following it by the book of timelines. And I just thought it would be fair and right for us to at least hold interviews and ask somebody to be on the board so they can get their name on that ballot, so the public have the opportunity to either run against that person or to speak their mind, instead of waiting the 60 days and appointing somebody and putting them on the board for a full year before an election. So we're just trying to hit all of the timeline marks, make sure, because the cutoff date, I think, is March 27th to get your name on the ballot.
The only thing like I said, typically it had been the governance committee. I was just gonna put it out there. I don't know if this is legit, but it seems as though if there were board members that, like blocks that wanted to be a part of it, could you have up to 5? Because it still would be a quorum of the board, so it wouldn't be like a full meeting. But could you have up to 5 people on the hiring committee if there was a lot? That hasn't been an issue in the past ever, but you could technically have a larger committee, couldn't you? Or maybe I'm wrong.
No, of course. And honestly, Jen, if you want to be on this committee and you feel strongly about it, I am fine with that. I'm not gonna tell anybody on the board that, no, they can't be part of this process. If you feel strongly about it and you wanna be part of this committee, I'm okay with that. Okay? Jack?
I missed what the original concern or question was.
Who is going to be the hiring committee, who is going to be the choosing committee for the appointed board member?
Oh, and Lance may just have the last 6 years, I've got a few more years and vacancies. And there was not a governance committee at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just the chair appointed 3 people. Wasn't necessary to have any more than 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
And that you just interviewed, and that whether it was a strictly elementary or a combination, it didn't matter. In this particular case, I would just say 3 people and let them handle the interview process and the recommendation to the board.
I'm just kind of confused, because Lloyd's term really wouldn't be up until the next year, so that person wouldn't be on the ballot. But you're saying, and you said that we have to put them on the ballot, and it'll only be for 1 year, just so that we can, but doesn't it make more sense just to appoint somebody for a year?
Chris, I'll take care of that. State law only allows you to fill to the end, to the next election, not fill the entire term of the person.
Okay.
State law.
Okay. Well, and we're just making sure that we've had a few, some of the information we've gotten, there are different viewpoints of when 60 days start, when it doesn't start. So this time frame we're sticking with, we are knocking off and making sure we are following all mandates, no matter how you interpret the law. And this, again, will give that person the opportunity to get their name on the ballot. They won't miss the cutoff. And we're just trying to make sure we're following within those 60 days.
And that is a very common procedure in fulfilling vacancies throughout the county and many other county boards, where if somebody, regardless of the months left, you fill those months, and then you have to run for the remainder of the term.
I'd like to make a motion to declare the high school trustee position for the Summers Lakeside District 4 vacant.
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Ursula. It's been moved and seconded. Do we have any further discussion? None. Any public comment on this? None. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, Sue, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Up next, resolution for our high school election. Chris?
Yes, so this is just the same call for election document that we passed back in, I think, the second January meeting. This is just the amended one with Lloyd, or the Summers Lakeside position on the resolution.
I was just gonna make a motion.
Yeah, do we have a motion?
Yeah, I move that I can't read what it says, but move to approve the amendment to I can't read it. Move that we approve the amendment to the election filing. I believe that's what it is.
Two high schools.
How can you read that? Yeah, give it to Jennifer. She said it.
Thank you, Ursula.
Yeah.
I'll
For the
second.
Thank you, Lance. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion, any questions on this? None. Any public comment? None. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Sue, how do you vote?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, budget update.
Okay, so we're just continuing to narrow in here on, some clarity on the budget. In the March meeting, we anticipate bringing to you some recommendations of what it could look like in 5 years by connecting, projected enrollment or projected flat enrollment, and then different options for how our facilities align. Today is more about just understanding a little deeper of where we are with the budget and then what our next steps are specifically related to levies. So we're really on point 4, and we're just continuing to check things off this agenda. And we're moving along as scheduled through this bigger picture budgeting process where we brought together that committee that involved some principals and some union members and some teachers and some office folks. Just a reminder of the norms. I think in this meeting, the focus is on least negative impact. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with budget deficits, there's going to be a negative impact. We've been trying to navigate the waters to what is least negative, least harmful. You've seen this slide before, and just a reinforcement that there's lots of things going on, and we're moving towards the things that have a bigger impact on the budget, and that does feel good. And we're holding to our promises on checking some of these boxes off the list. And we're getting towards that proposal for some long-term solutions. That's just a review. We showed you this last time. I think the clarity piece here, actually, I'll talk about it on the next slide. Go ahead, Pete. We just color-coded this. As you've seen this at the last meeting, the orange boxes are elementary, the green boxes are high school, and the blue boxes are combined budgets where we share costs. Anything below the line pointing down indicates that we're below the average, we're spending that much below the average, and then above is where we're spending above. We're gonna dig into the details a little bit more tonight. We found ourselves just getting, in this process of we're trying to balance the budget, but we also don't want to lose track of the bigger picture. So right now we have a negative budget, but the bigger picture is we want our resources to align with where we want to be spending money. And so if you go back up, Pete, to the other slide, we just want to be transparent with the fact that, they're getting to a balanced budget might not mean in the short term putting more money towards facilities and maintenance, but big picture, we probably need to spend more money on facilities and maintenance, or we're going to be chasing this deferred maintenance problem. Came up a little bit in a discussion about interlocal last time, but right now the goal is just to get in balance, not to realign expenditures that match our base plan or any of those things. That's what we're trying to go back up on, Pete. That's what we tried to represent in those highlighted areas, is we have some things that we know are going to cost money in the future that aren't accounted for yet. But in the short term, with the building reserve, we've identified that from that account we can spend $100,000 on some of the issues that were brought up through the safety audit, and then $250,000 for maintenance and facilities. We can probably roll that forward for a couple of years out of that building reserve account, but it's not something that is going to sustain us long term. So we're going to have to roll those things into that general fund. Just to review, we looked at kind of high-low costs and, what we're trying to do with those numbers. And then the next slide, Chris and I will tag team these, which means Chris can interrupt me whenever I don't represent the numbers accurately. But, this first look is what are we spending on salaries per student at each one of our sites? There are lots of reasons. So, there's some caution here when we roll out these slides and roll out these numbers that we're not jumping to any sort of conclusion about efficiency or anything like that. Some of it has to do with the structure of our sites and how many students our sites can hold, and then how many staff you need at those sites. But at the bottom, and if you're struggling to read it, this number here at the lower left is Flathead High School, and the cost per student is roughly $5,500. Then you move to Rankin, and it's about $5,500. Rankin and Flathead are really good examples of staffing student ratios that maximize some efficiency. On an elementary, we've talked about that 400 to 500 students. That's right about where Rankin is. 4N is Edgerton, so they're just a little bit above, but they're pretty close to that. They're 5,600 per student. Glacier is also very close to Flathead. Flathead and Glacier on most of our charts come in pretty neck and neck. And then you get to Peterson, right? And it's right towards the middle of that graph, and we're still holding steady. That's a little less student body for the same staffing ratios. KMS has some different instructional designs that drive some of those staffing costs. Typically, middle school is more closely aligned to high schools because of the period schedule and that rotation versus the type of homeroom classrooms that you see in elementaries, and have a combo at KMS. And then you start to see these numbers jump, and this just speaks to kind of some structural issues that we have in our building, or in our district, but also speaks to some program things. We know, this next one's the Ag Center, we know that CTE courses are going to cost more money. You don't have as many students typically in those courses. Just lots of different variables drive those costs up. But these are the types of things that start to separate when you're 90% funded versus 100% funded. So when we look at the high school side, we're 90% funded, and we're trying to do things that are more aligned with districts that are more 100% funded. The next one is Hedges. Hedges is a unique, historic building, some challenges there. Russell, and our two smallest elementary schools are on the far right here. And, when you have building capacities that are closer to 250 than 450, it's going to drive some of these numbers. And then the last one is LEC on the far right. And, when you're running programs that are a little bit more specific to smaller groups, that's just what the numbers are going cell. The next graph is the inverse of that, all of that information. So when we're looking at enrollment students to the FTE, it would make sense that it's the opposite chart. And that's what we really see. The discrepancy or the difference there would be if you're looking at staffing costs versus the enrollment to FTE, and there was a discrepancy, it'd just be, you know, where those staff in those buildings fall on the seniority chart and on that salary matrix. But it actually is a good graph for us because it tells us that there's a good mix of staff at those sites that's pretty evenly balanced. We're not seeing a big discrepancy saying all of our new teachers are at this site that's driving some different costs. Yeah.
With the cost per student, is it mostly the FTE cost per student, or is the cost of running the building a year also in those numbers?
Salaries, yeah.
Okay, so also though, does a small school cost about as much as it, like, is the cost, like, does the heat make up for what the insurance and all, like, would it be similar that the smaller schools, the cost of running them would also be higher per student, or we just don't have that information yet?
So it's a good question. And I haven't actually spent, I haven't spent a ton of time yet. The vast majority of my time has been on salary benefits and kind of modeling this stuff right here.
Those numbers are easier to get.
But the real reason being, just for the elementary side this year, we're, with steps and lanes, we're looking at about almost $22 million in salaries and benefits. Just $2.7 million in non-salary costs.
Okay,
So it's a fraction.
so it's a big, okay, so it's not.
But inside those salary costs are all salaries in the building, not just teaching salaries.
That's correct, right? We need custodians in the building, we need food service people.
Administrators, office managers.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know in our elementary school, there's certain elementary schools that have life skills, larger life skills population than others. Is that in part reflected in these numbers?
Yeah, so these enrollment to FTE numbers here, what you're looking at is just populations that are not self-contained, both teachers and students. The salary cost puts everything together, but this strips out here the self-contained.
So the life skills program isn't in.
Life skills is primary development.
Right.
So like at Hedges, if life skills was in that number, it would be skewed. So Chris pulled all of those self-contained out.
And on the previous slide, we were looking at a cost per student that has pulled it.
Right, so the previous slide did not pull out self-contained. It looks at all staff in the building, regardless of their position, so paras, office managers.
This one,
This one does, yes, it includes every person in the building and every student in the building. The next one is just looking at certified staff.
Okay.
And it excludes, like I said, self-contained both for staff and students.
Put some of that in parentheses underneath the title.
That probably does, the biggest example of that would be Hedges, right between those two.
Right, but just as a little, to not be contrarian or anything, but if you go back there, Matt, to the first slide. Elrod also runs Edgerton also runs a self-contained program, the preschool program, right? Pretty sizable, but due to its capacity, you can see there that Edgerton is one of the most efficiently run schools from a dollar perspective.
Third slide.
Yeah, and so then this next slide here is, just to kind of reiterate, we really have two separate budget problems that are very distinct, right? So one is the elementary side. The elementary side is 100% funded. relatively, like, within a few, and $150,000. So on the high school side, at 90% funded, what this is showing you is AA high schools across the state. And if you divide their general fund revenue by the number of students enrolled, this is the discrepancy between Kalispell, which is the lowest of all the AA high schools across the state, compared to Great Falls, which is the only other district that's not 100% funded. They're within about $460,000 of being fully funded. If Kalispell was currently fully funded, we would realize another $2.5 million in our general fund in this current year. So on the far end, you can see Helena. They are receiving $8,800 per student, about $1,200 more than us. If you just do the comparison between us and Great Falls, so you take the difference, it's approximately $700 between the $8,300 that they get per student and the $76 that we get. You multiply that $700 by the 3,000 students we have in our high school, and that equates to $2.1 million. If we were equal to Great Falls, we would receive another $2 million in the current year. And then the last tab,
so I'm squinting really hard to try and, if we were fully funded, we would have an additional, how much more per student?
we'd have to do the math, put $2.5 million divided by 3,000.
Oh, I thought $1,000.
Move it around, move the.
Is that live now on our thing? I couldn't see, okay.
Yeah, about $833.
$833. So I guess what I was trying to figure out is if we were fully funded, where would our box move over in comparison to the,
Just below Great Falls, just below the next one.
it would be just below the next.
Yeah, we'd be 833.
Okay, that.
Yeah, we'd be just slightly above Great Falls, between Great Falls and Bozeman.
Understood. And then just me out here, I looked at the wonderful piece put together by the Montana Free Press on how to understand school funding, and it was the lunch, tray example, and, I read it twice. But I guess my question is understanding between the 90% and the 100% funded. The 90% is what the state determines will be 90% of our funding, and that's what we get funded at?
80.
80.
So the 80 is the base.
The 80 is the base, and then they set the upper number that they would allow the school district to go to if the community filled the gap, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so we're at 90% on the high school. I guess, how are we filling that 10%?
We're not.
Well,
It says we're 90%.
from 80 to.
From 80 to 90.
80 to 90 is, what the taxpayers have previously approved.
Okay, that are kind of remnants that have not turned out yet.
The last
Well, no,
levy
it
in
never
2007.
It never turns out.
Yeah.
The taxpayers have approved levies in the past, and those are permanent.
Okay,
The percentage value of the levies goes down as costs go up. So a levy that maybe once got us to 98%, as our costs have gone up, as salaries have gone up, as all of the other costs have gone up, they don't still fill it 100%. So that's why if we don't get another levy, it goes down another like % or 2 every year because the costs go up and we don't keep.
Well, and you're thinking the technology levy, that has,
a finite.
that,
Mhm.
yes, that had a term limit. But these other ones don't, so they're permanent.
Got it, but then the percentage goes down as the cost goes
Yes.
up, right? And then our funding, the second question I have is the funding for cost of inflation that we all have experienced over the last 3 years more acutely. Our cost of inflation that we from a school district get is not tracking the actual cost of inflation that all of us face in our personal lives.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Then second, on the elementary side, when we say we're 100% funded, how are we making up that almost 20% on the elementary side? Are these historic levies that are permanent?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now I understand. See, that's a piece that we'll have to reach out to the Montana Free Press, because I just didn't quite gather.
covered.
I have a quick question for Jackson on that. The legislator approves an inflation increase every year. Do you know, does anybody here know what they approved this
The
year?
last 2 years have been less than 2%.
That's what I thought, okay,
This year, at 3, which is the max by law.
okay.
But it only applies to the state-funded portion, which is like 44% of the budget.
Okay. And then I think there's the public.
No, I don't know that
We keep it until the.
I might not be, you don't have to let me if it's not.
It's okay. Can we wait till the end of the presentation?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's some finer points in there, you know, about when levies are run and how levies are attached to enrollment, and when your enrollment increases, your capacity for requesting to the max increases. But generally speaking, I think that the major concepts were covered. On the elementary side, we had our recent levy is the reason that we're closer to 100% funded. On the high school side, the last levy was in 2007. So if you just look at the, you know, nearly 20 years, that's how far you'd start to drift from that fully funded.
There we go. And then the last slide, not really, sort of, here, it shows crossing in the high school AA districts. This is what the local taxpayers pay on a per student basis in each of these districts. The one caveat here is it does exclude the debt service fund, which is where you would fund your bonds for your buildings and those types of projects. It excludes it because the timing of when bonds are issued and when a project's completed can like throw the numbers really significantly. So for the most apples-to-apples comparison and the most consistent on a year-over-year basis, this shows you that we are the cheapest on a per student cost to the taxpayer, just over $2,900. Both taxpayers pay over double what Kalispell do or Flathead counties do on a per student basis at $6,000 per student. So all I have to say, and I think I've heard Jack say multiple times now, the time I've been here, that the district, especially the high school district, has ran very efficiently and has not been burdensome to the taxpayer. And perhaps putting words in your mouth, Jack, but
Well, no, that's correct, but the fascinating part is since 2007, we've added so many programs, offerings, and curriculum delivery methods, team teaching, that we've been able to do it at a lower cost than all the other districts, and now that inflation is catching up with us, some of those aspects may have to be readdressed and looked at differently, and so the taxpayer has not been able to understand, therefore not appreciate how efficiently run we are and deliver good curriculum delivery to students. And that's very unfortunate. The only other thing we're going to try and do is tie that to performance, you know, whether it's ACT or whatever kind of testing. We're working on that data to see how that turns out. But to me, I don't know that the taxpayers can even appreciate that. So I don't, you know, people just don't like paying taxes, and unfortunately, they don't see what kind of product they're getting for that.
So we wanted to run some projections just to ground where we are. I will be making a recommendation that the board consider renewing the tech levy at the elementary district and running a incremental smaller levy at the high school. We'll get into those numbers in a second, but if the elementary tech levy does not pass, we're looking at a roughly $1.6 million deficit. If the elementary levy does pass, the tech levy does pass, we'd still be looking at about a $500,000 deficit. On the high school side, if the levy does not pass, we're looking at about $1.5 million deficit. If the levy that we are recommending, and of course you guys can do with it what you want, we would still have an $800,000 deficit on the high school side. Go ahead into the next one. The strategy here would be to break this into 2 different years to be able to look at how these numbers and how we're projecting these numbers to come into balance. Ultimately, our goal needs to be run a balanced budget. The facilities and the student enrollment, that's a projection that you're going to see at the next meeting. It's a little bit more complicated because we don't really know until students start to show up or they don't show up. So we're going to have to identify different pathways to get there. But this is a simplistic way of looking at that. What I'm proposing is that on the elementary side, we just run a renewal. So the last time we ran a tech levy, we kind of tried to forecast in the future, and what the forecast looked like in the future, because it's a sunsetting levy in 10 years, was about 1.5 million on the tech side. I think we need to be able to live within the means of just the renewal, and the renewal was at that 11.3 mils. The messaging for this is simple. It's a sunsetting levy. It's a renewal for the exact mills. It's not a little bit less. It's not a little bit more. It's just a flat renewal of what is sunsetting. It will be our job to align our technology expenses into that levy. We do have some retirement savings, and this, some of this is just unpleasant. And when I said least, when we go back to our norms, these are the things that we're talking about that are least impactful. What we're considering is at least 3 FTE reduction at the K-8 level. So we would like to use attrition. If we have 5 retiring teachers, we'd like to not fill 3 of those positions and only fill the 2. There's a couple reasons for this. One is when you don't rehire, you're not rehiring back at the higher rate, typically on the salary schedule. If we get down the road and we are looking to balance the budget and you're looking to do it through RIFs, you're comparing like a $45,000 employee to an $80,000 employee by the time you add salaries and benefits. It's not quite 2 to 1, but you can think of it that way. If we don't take advantage of some of the opportunities we have with attrition, we could find ourselves in a position where we're ripping twice as many teachers that would make up that same difference. On a previous slide and a previous meeting, we also identified that about 33% of our staff are maxed out on that salary schedule. So that's driving some of that number. That still only equates to about 316,000. So we're forwarding this projection. If the levy passes and we make those reductions, we'd still be sitting on a $184,000 deficit. If the levy doesn't pass, we'd be sitting on about a $1.28 million deficit. Jen?
The state sets are at 80% level. Do they consider the demographics of the teachers here?
No.
Trying, it's not gonna work.
So this does bring up a broader question that I've been mulling over, and I don't understand, and maybe I have a way too simplistic view of it, but we have a constitutional guarantee that we provide education to our children, and our Constitution has guarantees that flow with equal and greater force to our children. Yet we have a funding system that is set up for us, that we have to live within, that funds us at 80%. How are we meeting our constitutional requirement to provide an education to our kids? And at what point is our elected officials going to recognize the system that has been set up and that we have to live within is set up to fail in this state, which we in Kalispell are not terribly unique. I think it's very difficult to pass a levy in many communities in the state of Montana. So it's almost as if we're intentionally underfunding our schools. And how is that living up to our constitutional guarantees to our kids?
Hold on one second. The problem is when, this can go all day long. We could talk about this for days and days and days. The problem is what they are considering, what are essential. Think about everything we offer here in Kalispell. That's all above and beyond, right? So that's where we're trying to educate our community on what falls in a basic education. what are we providing? We're providing above and beyond a basic education. Our community is given, I mean, our kids are never told no. They want to take a special class. Look at, we're gonna start implementing German. We've got this, we've got that, and that's all above and beyond. So this conversation goes even broader than that of
Right.
what the
We're-
basic.
We're basically using 80% of basic education to provide all this other stuff. And I guess my question lies in, how are we meeting our constitutional mandate if we are getting funded at 80% to provide a basic education when we know full well many communities, if not almost all communities in Montana, will not fund that other 20%. And that's just basic education. That's not all the wonderful programs that we bend over backwards to provide in this community and to these kids. I agree.
You summarized it really well, and it started back with the Montana Quality Education 20 years ago when they sued this, the state. Yep, and successfully changed the funding model there, and that's what will have to be done again.
Okay. When I've talked with people about this issue, and they say, well, what do you do? And I say, well, if we gave up all of the things that made our school special, all of the things that kept our kids engaged, all of the things that the community cherishes, which we could legally do, and we would still meet our legal mandate of a basic education, we would never have to have another budget conversation again. All of the things that make us special, that give the kids the things they want. Extracurriculars, all of the electives, the Ag Center, the Linderman, anything that we say, this is special, this is beautiful, this is amazing, those things are not included.
Yeah, lots of conversation there. I would say a couple things though, and then move on. One is, I think we are seeing other communities though fully fund their schools. And so when Chris shows that graph and where we fall with some of those other districts, AA districts are fully funding their school. So that becomes our burden, the people in this room right now, of how are we communicating with our friends and neighbors? And what is our plan to move forward and become a school that is funded to the level that we believe is the most appropriate to provide for the opportunities of our kids? I know that's a big topic, and we're gonna address that very comprehensively going down the road, but that's the task ahead of us. And then the other thing I'd say is we are saying no to kids. And so we're dealing with large class sizes. We're dealing with, I'm recommending some reductions, and those are reducing opportunities.
Can I chime in? I think you have to look not just at fully funded and not fully funded when we compare ourselves to other schools, because we offer way more classes, which means there's teachers, there's all of the other stuff that go into it, than all of these other schools do. Like, do they have outdoor pursuits where we travel and have paper buses and stuff like that? Probably not. Do they take them on the mountain to ski? Probably not. Do they have a jewelry making class? Probably not. Like, that's where the 80%, if we cut back on some of the stuff that they're doing, we could get to the 100%. I think it's subjective to compare us to other schools when we're not running the same curriculum, programs, and opportunities as the other schools, because we're going above, and that's what you were trying to say. We're going above to what the kids want and can excel in. So that's why we're not getting the 100%.
Well, no, it's not that we'd still be at 90%. We just wouldn't have to do budget cuts because we would be cutting, well, we do budget cuts the first year because we'd get back to the basic education and not have those things. We'd never get to the 100% funding. We'd still be able to operate at 90%. We just have a lot less offerings and a lot less activities. So so the 100% still will not be achievable. And that's the dilemma. Even the schools that are 100% are still going through budget cuts because of all the ESSER funding that was provided and their, I don't know if there was lack of planning or concern down the road, because we're still doing budget cuts even though we had ESSER funding, but we saved that. I don't know if the other schools saved that at all. And so I don't know what percentage of their budget cuts compared to the general fund is compared to us. But to me, the 90% will always be there. It's just how you spend it and toward what's called the basic education versus all the extra things that we've added over the years that have been very successful in helping out.
Yeah, I think part of the point of kind of just doing some of the internal comparison stuff we showed tonight is just to show that there are things we can do on our end to help with our budget situations. We're not going to help us and completely just dependent on like past levies or else, right? And I think as we go forward here, specifically with some of the long-range facility planning stuff, moving forward with some of that stuff, and there'll be some hard decisions to make along the way, will move us significantly towards budget neutral. If we pass levies, it'll be easier, but I think we do have the ability to get to where we need to go. It'll be a lot of work and a lot of hard decisions along the way, but we can get there. Just case in point, if we were to staff our elementary schools at the levels, the ratios that Edgerton and Rankin are currently ran today, we can't because of facility issues, but we had realized very close to $1.5 million in savings like overnight, right? So there's things, management things that we can do that will take time, but will move us forward.
Chris, I appreciate your comment. It's actually something that we've talked about internally that highlights the difference between the elementary and the high school problem. So our elementary is fully funded, and I would put our elementary schools for what we offer and what we're able to do against any in the state, and there's probably, you know, different types of programs, but there's nothing that is happening other places that we're not able to do here. I don't think that same thing is true at the high school. So on the high school side, our problem is we're 90% funded. You know, the specifics on the outdoor pursuits and the types of classes, I think you'd find some differences there, but I would be willing to bet that there are more opportunities for students in school systems that are 100% funded than currently exist here. We're very proud of the things that we do here for our high school students, the opportunities we've been able to stretch on a 90% budget. But if we were able to add that $2 million that would get us to fully funded, we'd be able to do more things. And those other districts are able to do more things because they have more funding. That's an unfortunate reality, but that is the reality that I believe is true. Back to this one, what we wanted to show on the elementary side, and then we'll talk about the high school, is two years. So not just looking at it like, hey, we have this deficit, now what? But if we're on slide, yep, you're there, Pete. So if we were to pass the tech levy and make those FTE reductions, we'd still be looking at about $184,000 deficit. If the levy didn't pass, that balloons up to 1.28. So if we fast forward that to next year, you know, what's on the table next year? This is where the conversation gets complicated and gets a little bit more uncomfortable, frankly. We would still have the opportunity to come back and consider, you know, the tech levy again. And so we just put a to be determined. There's also the potential of retirement savings. So this is the savings that you would achieve if you hired that back, but somebody retires and then you hire back a new employee, but the difference between those salaries and those employees, that could be a consideration. The next level is hard, right? There are some major discussions that we would probably need to have if we found ourselves in that position where we would consider our actual enrollment versus the projections from the long-range facility plan, and if there's a possibility to consolidate sites. The easiest way to frame this up is, I think that most people can appreciate that it's cheaper when you double up, when families double up, right? If we have the same amount of students, but we're under less roofs, or as a district, we own less roofs and we're trying to maintain less roofs, there is some efficiency there in the structure and organization. Those are some of the details we hope to outline for you as options and possibilities, but it's a conversation that's loaded with lots to consider. And then the last part of it is taking advantage of any attrition. So if we had some retirements and we just chose not to fill those positions, and then what I put as the last option, and that's when you start reducing staff to get to that desired amount. Again, working from the bottom, when you're cutting your lowest paid teachers, to get to that budget number is just the toughest road to go versus taking advantage of some of the other things that you can do. what we'll be recommending is whatever that deficit is at the end of this year. So if you go back up, Pete, one slide, whatever that is we're asking that be pulled from the interlocal / ESSER funds. I'll be real quick with this because I know you guys have had this experience, but we have used ESSER funds, I think, in a very responsible way where we've paid for the practical costs of the year that has freed up general funds. It's an allowable expenditure and it allows us to take general fund dollars and put it into the interlocal agreement. We've been able to do that a couple times. It would be appropriate in this situation, given the circumstance of ESSER, to take that money and use it for staffing for a short period of time. Typically, I wouldn't recommend that out of the interlocal because the interlocal agreement, in my humble opinion, should be used for one-time only type of expenditures. It's an agreement between the elementary and the high school district that says, if we have remaining funds at the end of the year and we can put those money aside so they can accumulate to pay for bigger projects, one-time only projects, then that's the responsible use of those funds. But with ESSER, it's kind of changed a little bit to where we can take those funds that aren't necessarily from the general fund, put it in there, and so this would be an appropriate use for that. So again, P15, we're talking about least negative impact, and then on the elementary side, we're going to be asking you to support a technology levy that is a renewal.
The thought process behind a renewal versus an actual cost of the technology meeting is it'll be easier for our voters renewal as opposed to
that's part of it. I think the other reality that we've had when we've really dug into these numbers is on the elementary side, when we showed that bar graph, we're overstaffed. And so that's a really unfortunate reality that is hard to share. But per student, we're spending more money on instructional staff than the average. And so reductions there does free up money in the general budget to take care of other things. We shouldn't be in a position as a district where we're dependent on a technology levy to cover costs where we've spent more in different categories.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the renewal request is a more appropriate request.
it's more the true cost of the
It's more the true cost of technology, and it's really hard to forecast out what are technology costs going to be in 10 years, and whatever mills we marry to in this levy request, we own for 10 years. So it is a little bit of a guessing game, but I think that's our responsibility to say, hey, this is a renewal. It is still a significant investment in technology, but our general fund should also be paying for some technology too. So it'd be our job to manage our tech resources that we can do it with that amount. Okay, shifting gears here a little bit, we're going to talk about the high school. Actually, no, we're going to check a box. So we're identifying a amount to be levied on this side. We're continuing to work through some of these goals. And then just a good reminder that everything we've been touching, whether it's we start talking about FTE and attrition, or we're talking about potential risks in the future, or site consolidation, or running a levy, like all of these things come back to this: how do we communicate with all of the different groups in our community? We have internal communications, we have external communications, we have alumni communications. We've never developed those plans. So every time we have these conversations, it keeps coming back to this of we really need to be thoughtful how we move forward to setting up a communication rig so that when something like this happens, we can deploy messaging and be ready to go. On the high school side, we want to talk about what fully funded looks like. We're not there. That's maybe more of a long-term goal, but we're starting to identify kind of where we fit into that system. So back to this chart, remember the green is the high school side, so it's the reverse of that of the elementary. So on the average, we're spending a lot less on instruction than the average district. But that goes back to we're also receiving 90% of funding. Mm-hmm. So that correlates and makes sense. What we're recommending on the high school side is a $1 levy. There's a couple reasons for that. I'd say the first one is we really want to have some time. We're pretty fresh central office admin team right now, and we want to have some time to get our arms around what would a larger levy request be, and what specifically would it pay for before we go out to the community. What we know in the short term is we need at least $1. So at the bare minimum, to keep everything running the same, we need $1. Not going to get us ahead, but it's going to help us from moving backwards. And the $1 would be applied, and there's no exact way to do this. We tried to look at what the average average property would be. It's hard to find that exact number. And what we're responsible for on the ballot is showing what it would be for 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, and 600,000. So we picked the $300,000 mark, and we said, what would $1 look like for 300,000? And then people can do the math on their property value based on that. But it'd be the $1 request. There's also two ways to look at it. If the levy does not pass, we would use attrition to reduce 4 staff members from the high school staff. That would equate to about, with salaries and benefits, not filling those positions, 80,000. So that's where we come up with one set of numbers. Now, if the levy did pass, instead of reducing those staff, we would just take advantage of the difference between that retiring staff and then the new staff member coming in, and that difference is about 38,000. We just left a placeholder for charter schools. I know it's an agenda item later, but we've never done the charter school budgeting, and what we're finding the more and more we dig into it is we're going to be able to pay for some unique programming, some unique opportunities with charter school, but it's really unclear how much that will diminish the burden on our general fund. And I'd say that every time we look at it, it seems to be less, but it's still a number that might be a couple $100,000, but I'd be cautious to recommend, to say that I projected it to be any more than that. When you get to the bottom of that sheet, we're looking at a couple things. If the levy does pass, the $1 request, we'd still be looking at about a $648,000 deficit. If the levy does not pass, we'd be looking at about a $1.2 million deficit. So again, the same thing, fast forwarding it out next year, what would this look like? Starting with those same numbers, we would still have an opportunity to look at a general fund request. That's to be determined. I don't want to tie myself to anything right now, but I would say that it would be nice to be able to provide some space so that we could really get our arms around what we'd be requesting, have some time to communicate. We're at an uphill battle, fighting almost 2 decades of no votes, so we really need to be clear in what we're asking for. There may be retirement incentives, and then the next box, just like on the elementary, the further you go down, we're talking least. These become really challenging decisions, but we would need to go towards decisions about program instruction models changing, and then use of attrition and or RIFs if we want to get back to that balanced number. And you all have smartphones with calculators on them. If you're taking 1.2 million and you're dividing it by 45, and come up with that's the number of worst case scenario RIFs that we'd be in a situation if we wanted to balance the budget. Again, I think it's appropriate in this situation that in the short term, in the next 2 years, depending on those diminishing numbers, that we could call on the interlocal agreement / ESSER funds to cover that deficit. We put those back on there. I don't know if we need to look at those enrollment FTE numbers again. But on the high school side, there is not the double up type of site consolidation efficiencies that we could potentially see at the elementary. It's just not the structure and design, and it's not the elementary budget problem, frankly. The high school budget problem is directly related to the 90% funded. So our recommendation will be to ask the trustees to run a levy request in the high school district for $1.
$1 a month.
It'd be $1 a month
per household.
So how it'd show up on the ballot is
Mhm.
there'd be a number associated with what it would look like for 100,000, what that would look like for 200,000, and then the $300,000 would be $1.
Okay.
And the $600,000 would be $2,
Mhm.
but it is by month, so it'd be $12.
Okay.
Collect a total of $700,000.
Yep, which again, does not get us home, just to be clear, but it keeps us neutral.
It would get us.
Now, it's depending on how much house is tax value of your house.
Right, right, but if we get $700,000 from $1, we would get more from $2.
Yeah,
Like if all the houses were valued at
Talking
that.
about here.
yeah,
I mean-
it might, there's a lot of things that go into this, and Chris could probably speak a little bit more than I could, but, the high school also has an increasing enrollment. Actually, we have a little dip right now, but we have enrollment issues. Remember, the high school doesn't have a tax levy, so we're kind of working some of those things out. I don't know if we could say right now what the request would be that would put us into the position where we want to be in the high school for taking care of our needs. That's why we're only requesting $1 now, is we know that we need at least $1, but before we get to a position where we ask for more than that, we want to be really clear on what we're asking for and what that would go towards. But it is going to be more than $1. It would be more. When that happens, I don't know when that's going to happen. Hopefully, it's 2 years from now.
I guess my reaction is somewhat by the fact that there's a really big disconnect between, ability to communicate how we are funded, our community's understanding of how we're funded. And so our community feels like we're constantly levying them, which is exactly how we're set up to run and how we're supposed to run. But if we do $1, and granted, we need to get a better understanding for maybe a better, bigger package at some point in the future that we take to our, really try and understand what we're trying to accomplish. I mean, I don't know if maybe I'm just naive and thinking, trying to sell to our voters the difference between $1 and $2. I don't know that per month is necessarily going to be, you know, harder, or easier to sell to our voters. And so I guess what I'm saying is, we know our community does not like getting levies. They don't like it being continual, and it be a $1 to $2 distinction. I hate to say this, but I see it as somewhat negligible in communicating it to our voters. Give us $2.
We've had all of those same conversations, and this has also taken us back to that communication strategy and plan. We're all making decisions, and we've had these roundtable discussions about what we think is best, and I think in part we're making thoughtful recommendations and discussions around what we think and what the people that we run around with maybe think. But in a better way to look at this, and I think a way for us to look forward to, is actually having like survey information and having actual data that supports some of these decisions. We don't have that. I'm not saying your guess is better or worse than anybody else's. But I think it does highlight, again, our challenge of, if we don't have a good system for communicating, we're always going to be kind of winging it off of our gut feel. This specific request is to say, what would it take for us to be neutral and get by until we can put some of those other pieces in play? It's not intended to solve that problem. It's a short term, and whether it's a bad idea because people will associate it with, you know, you're always asking for money or whatever, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think you get into some different economic psychology there that I don't have the answer for, but when we came up with the number, we said, what would it take just to stop the bleeding right now?
For the most part, all of our prior levies have been to fully fund the budget, except for maybe 100 or 200,000 that would come out of the interlocal agreement, which never came out of the interlocal agreement. And those levy requests have always been in the, anywhere from $2 to $4 a month range. And it means that we were asking for anywhere from $1 to $2 million each time. So part of the thought process is, well, why not ask for less than $1 million and see if the voter will take that, see if that's more palatable? Because the voter doesn't want to pay taxes, that's really what it comes down to, regardless of what we try to present to them to convince them otherwise. So it comes down to dollars and cents. How many dollars are we willing to let float out of our pocket? So that we'll just see how magical $1 can be.
Jen, just to clarify, to get from 90% to 100%, we're looking at about 2.5 million.
Yeah, right, this is just basically covering our deficit, stopping the bleeding, that's not saying.
So a separate question, does anybody have a number of how much we've transferred into interlocal agreement and ESSER funds over the last couple of years?
Take me a couple minutes, I can get it for you.
I think it's about 3.5 or something like that.
Directly tying it to ESSER, that would be next to impossible. Well, not next to impossible, it'd take a few days of work, but just to transfer amounts out of the general fund.
Only because, you know, if we have to spend, because the elementary and high school levies don't pass, and we have to use 2.5, I think there's another $1 million in there that can be used for fiscal year 26. And that might be 500,000 per district, and that just means that there's gonna need to be some really, am I ahead of the game?
No, you're really speaking, you're speaking to this point. Something needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at the top where it says, you know, does not pass in both districts, we're at 3 million. So if we were to cover 3 million out of from our interlocal agreement 1 year, we carry that same problem next year.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the funds to do that 2 years in a row. So something has to give, and there has to be some incremental changes. The other side I would say is, when we talk about least impactful, that would be a really big lever to pull year 2 if we're trying to get $3 million different from where we are now. This multiple year and taking advantage of what we can and making the smallest steps is what we're trying to do. Not overstepping and doing too much, but making a step in the right direction. So there will be some reductions on the elementary side. One way or another, there will be some savings on the high school side. But big picture on the elementary side, we need to get our FTE aligned with a balanced budget. And on the high school side, we need to either reduce programming that fits 90% funded, or we need to increase funding that fits the programming that we have.
I want to start by saying I really, really appreciate this whole breakdown, and I feel like I already knew kind of a lot of things, but more now, and I do think that having this breakdown does make it easier to communicate a message. It was hard for me to see a deficit on the elementary side, knowing that we were 100% funded. It made it feel desperate and unfixable. And so it's really, really great to see these numbers broken down. And for me, I see a light on the elementary side. It feels like it could be hard, but it can be fixed. And on the high school side, I feel like it shows so clearly, not just that we are doing okay, but that we are doing exceptionally, amazingly well to offer more than one could expect we could do with the funding that we have. And people are going to have a class that they don't think deserves to be funded. I think that's the wrong way to look at this. I think you say, it's not about what my kid would need. It's about this idea that what we are doing is trying our very, very best to serve every single kid in this district. And especially, we're talking about with all of the partner districts to tell them what your kid needs, we are offering, and we can't keep doing it if we aren't funded. We are already doing more with less. And I don't know that we are doing more. That's debatable. I don't know if we're doing the right amount. These are little discussions that could be had, but the idea to me of cutting any more on the high school side feels really devastating when already we have cut so much to invest in these programs, like the things that we have let go of in order to keep these things, because the administrators, the teachers, the parents have said, these are the things we value, these are the things we want. Cutting any of that just feels so heartbreaking. And so I have been very on the fence about using this interlocal money because there's only enough to get through a year, and it feels like, well, the community doesn't understand, what are we, you know, we can't fix this. But I look at these numbers broken down so clearly, and it gives me enough hope to think maybe we can get through a year, maybe we can communicate this. I don't know that we can communicate it by May, but if we have a little more time, maybe we can communicate to the high school side why we need this money, and they will hear us. And also I can stop panicking a little bit about the elementary side, where it's like, well, we can't ask for more. They have said yes, it's up to us to figure out why it's not working. And so any hesitancies that I had about, let's try to pass a levy, but let's be prepared that we might have to use the interlocal agreement this year, has been put to rest because of the clarity of these numbers.
When we talk about the elementary, I hope people realize when we talk about Elrod or Peterson, that we're not trying to pick on them, because their capacity, their small capacity is a high cost, and that's not a negative, that's just the way it is. The only way you can improve it is to build more at each building, but Elrod, you can't build more at there. Hedges, you may be able to, so just because those are high cost areas is not a negative, it's just a fact that exists. And the only way to improve those is with more construction bond money to do something there. So the public needs to understand that part, that functionally they're very good, they're very efficient, they're just high cost because of the small footprint.
Yeah, great follow-up. General fund transfers from 2020 through 2023 from the general fund are just about 2.6 million.
2.6, thank you.
Duration on both of these.
The tech levy would sunset after 10 years, so it's a 10-year specific levy. The high school levy is just like any other general fund levy, which would never sunset. Once it's in place, it's for a certain amount of mills that is part of that formula, just like it was in 2007. Yeah, and again, I really appreciate you reminding us all that, you know, on the high school, or on just the communication front, the bigger conversation is that this is the funding formula mechanism that we live under. And so, you know, that this comment of continually asking for levies is the responsibility of the trustees. I think the gap years, and like we won't be asking for a general fund levy in the elementary this year because we're at 98%, is something that I would like to encourage the board to think about in the future of, instead of it being a budget deficit problem, we look at what percentage of funding do we want is the lowest we're going to go before we ask. And I'm just throwing out, what if we identified like 97% was the trigger? And that was the communication with the community of, we believe we can run our buildings at, and maybe it's 95, I'm just throwing something out there, at 90%, 95% funded. Whenever we drop below that, because of the mechanism that's tied to enrollment, that's tied to other things, that triggers a levy request. I think things like that maybe help with some of the communication, but the broader message is we need the system's built so that you continually ask the community to stay at fully funded.
And I don't know how many trustees, a couple of elementary trustees know this, but in the last general fund levy that was passed at the elementary level, it was not implemented in the first year that was authorized. It wasn't implemented until the second year, because the first year we were able to satisfy with the available budget funds that existed at that time. So there was a savings to the taxpayer there. And that just goes back to fiduciary responsibility, but I think that that needs to be a message set that you authorized it, we thought we would need it, and we decided we didn't need it. And so we preserved it for the following year.
Whether the taxpayers knew that or not.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and probably to our, our issue, our detriment, like, I don't know how many people appreciate it because,
Yeah.
or even recognized or knew that that had happened. But, you know, you can tell the story that there has been a discipline here with this board to, get the most out of every dollar.
Yeah.
Well, and the loss could be, I don't know if I want to say double what it was in the first year versus what it could be now as a result because of property valuation increases. That, and I don't remember what the dollar amount was, but you could just say and you can go, it can go back and calculate it to see just what it is. But we are hurting our budget by that amount as a result of not implementing it that first year, even though our budget didn't need it that first year.
So at the end of the day, rather than this presentation, what we're asking you guys to consider is a flat renewal at the elementary for the tech levy and a $1 levy with all the comments Jen made are totally taken to heart. But the communication would be that we'd be asking the community for $1 at the high school. That will be an action item at the next board meeting because the deadline for that decision is later in the month and we probably won't have that second board meeting. We'll make that decision.
With that recommendation, is there also going to be sort of the
You're going to be the spokesperson.
You're, when you talk about the funding, you like almost brought a tear to my, I was like, yeah, man, why is it only 80%?
It's actually on our, it's on our,
we live within a system that under today's paradigm, the system is frankly set up to fail.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we live in.
Yeah.
The one you're on now.
I'm sorry, Matt,
In that, would there be like a budget set aside for, communication and things like that? I think would that be like the question? Is there a plan, a budget?
all part of it.
18. It's actually on our checklist. It's slide 18, and what we're talking about here is the pink box, the levy approach communication plan. What we've been able to check today is identify a levy amount that we're comfortable with recommending. You're right, there's other work, like there's the timeline for that. The reality is,
Our window is so short right now.
yeah, and this is the cycle we've been living in for a while, and probably not just unique to Kalispell Public Schools, but I think the simplicity of the message is probably helpful. I also think we need to consider the value add when we try to do something more versus when we put out the communications we can, and we're not in a position where we can bank on a good communication plan. So just moving forward, accepting the reality of the time frame, the lack of reach that we probably have is part of the negative side that we're just gonna have to live with. Doesn't mean we're not gonna do the best we can, but I think we really need to be conscientious of if there's a value add to hiring a company that helps us do this, or if there's not as much of a value add to that.
Simple.
That's a pretty short elevator speech.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a special saying, special slogan?
Yeah, let's hear the
Yes,
thing.
you did.
What is
Let's
it,
hear
Pete?
it.
Can't remember.
Was it inappropriate?
I think Pete's interested
It was
to
good?
know how many people are willing to give $1 for education.
That would be his button.
We're just gonna see what happens. I'll be handling those.
I was gonna say, does it rhyme with buck? Is that why we're not saying it?
Okay.
All right. Move on.
Lots of information, but Jen, all of that stuff is gonna come back around
Yeah,
on
sorry,
the
I
12th.
didn't mean to.
It's okay, but
I'm
that way
gonna
we
do a
all know.
consent agenda thing too, so sorry.
So it'll come, we'll talk about it again on the 12th. Okay?
Table next one.
Okay, up next, charter schools. Pete,
Did you want to do public
Oh, yeah,
comment as a recorder has?
Oh, yeah, public
information
comment.
only. Can we do public
yeah.
comment? on
Public
that?
comment.
Okay, okay.
Denali, you
Denali, you had a question for us.
question, and I don't think you're allowed to answer me during, and so you can.
No, we can talk about it because it's on the agenda.
Okay.
It's on the agenda, so we can talk about it.
My question was, so if we, we bring in, correct me if I'm wrong. There's a chart with all the double A districts. Helena brings in like 1,000 per kid. I was just wondering, like, is that just because, is that just because they're, because they're like we're, because even if we were 100% funded, we'd still fall or just above. Also, why are those other districts?
So the primary driver is the levies.
Okay.
There are additional funding components that are less significant, but would mean the difference. One is, the number of staff those districts have. There's a element of funding called the quality educator, so you get a payment of dollars for each qualified educator. And, there's special education allowable cost, reimbursement, so they look at your special education spending proportionately, they reimburse some of that to you in your general fund. Those bigger districts have more special education. So you'll see some of those numbers being larger. So we'll never be equal because our size is less, but we certainly could be within a few $100s.
Are they over 100% funded?
So you can't be over 100%
Okay.
funded, but your reimbursement for splits it, so
Oh,
bigger districts.
you
more
can be
students.
over 100% funded. There's a few school districts that are there.
Which, when you get those quality education, and it's education units on top of your.
Well, prior to that.
Are you familiar with how you get your tax
Is that
credit
article?
funded?
Whitefish is over 100% funded.
I think the short answer, good question, I think the short answer is that the vast majority of that is tied to, the levy amounts. There's some nuances in, some of those other details, but the vast majority of that is tied to that.
So, yeah, so it wouldn't be related to the taxable values available, it'd be related to the mill levy.
Okay.
Because if the taxable values go up, the mill levy goes down. Relatively speaking.
So it's not because the houses. Okay.
Okay. Up next, charter school contracts. Pete, you're up.
Well, actually, Brad and Michelle have been waiting patiently.
That was a long wait.
Yeah, that was. So, actually, just what I've asked is just have to have them, talk a little bit about the charter schools. The Board of Public Education is going to act on charter schools, actually, tomorrow. So we said we'd give you guys a chance to sign off on these. A lot of discussions we've had, we've, jumped on, with the Board of Public Ed, trying to get some questions answered. There's still a lot that we have to figure out, as we're moving forward, but, Brad and Michelle and their teams have been working pretty hard on this, so I'll let Michelle start us off a little bit.
Have been hard at work. It's registration season, and so we had to start to figure out interest levels and possible enrollments for charter schools before you officially give us the green light to do so. And we're excited. We have approximately 80 students that expressed interest in our charter school, which is pretty darn cool. We have been hard at work on the curriculum side of things because for the PACE Academy model, while we are taking classes that we already teach in our school, we've taught for many years, we are teaching them in a different format, in a more flexible format. And so part of our education and promotion of PACE is to explain really how that is different, right? So we're teaching the same classes that I've been able to explain what a PACE Academy class would be like is there are anchor points. And what I mean by an anchor point would be where kids come into school in a class with their teacher for specific parts of the instruction. But then beyond that are the flexible parts. So a student, so if you're taking a required class like personal finance, a student might be in class, Flathead High School, 1 day a week, but then the other 4 days, they're working flexibly. They could be working at home, they could be working in a breakout space with peers on their own, right here in the building. So, what's exciting to me about our curriculum work for the PACE Academy is it aligns so well with PCBE. The work that we're doing for PACE Academy helps us move forward with PCBE. So my takeaways from community meetings that I've had, and our biggest one was at registration night. Ursula was there, popped in for a brief period of time, just helping our community understand really what the PACE Academy is, and our staff as well, right? Because it is something new. I've learned that it's helpful to explain what it isn't to help people understand what it is, right? And because, you know, it's fascinating, the misperceptions out there. People will jump to, well, it's an at-risk program. No, it's not, right? They'll say, well, it's like remote school. No, it's not, right? And they'll say, well, okay, so it's gonna be online school. Well, part of it might be online. But again, we're gonna have those anchor points in the building, so no. And, a big thing that it is not, and this is important for high schoolers to understand, is it's not easy. It's not the easy path to get through. It's just a different path. And so our efforts have been on communication about what it is. Our efforts have been recruiting kids, generating interest, and then trying to plan for those possibilities. We know our magic enrollment number is 41, right? To get the base entitlement, we have to have 41 students. And so as we thought and looked at our interest for registration, we've really thought about what that means and how many courses that's going to take. Because, you know, bottom line, we want to get our 41 kids as we go forward and build from there. So we have some specific plans around that.
Space?
Oh, yes. Directly upstairs from here in the flex room is a bank of classrooms that, interestingly enough, we designed with the architects and engineers in 2017, I think it was. We designed this little bank of 4 classrooms. There's like 3 different breakout areas. There's 2 small conference rooms up there. And in 2017, when we thought, hey, that might be a great idea, we had no idea that it'd be a perfect fit for charter school, right? 7 years later, here we be, right? So it's a good space up there. It's going to require, so if you think about it, and if we are starting with, if you take the 80 kids that expressed interest, that's going to mean that we'll have the classrooms upstairs here, that pod of 4, used for PACE Academy. But a PACE schedule, if you're a teacher teaching a PACE Academy class, your entire day is not going to be only teaching PACE Academy, right? You'll still be teaching some sections of Flathead High School classes. So, you know, we have to kind of work that whole angle out. Like, do we want that space exclusive for PACE and then teachers will move in and move out? Like, we haven't gotten that far in the planning, but we're pretty excited that we have a space that we feel is going to work really, really well. So, and we have, you know, we don't have empty classrooms, right? We have, in fact, some classrooms that are shared among teachers. We have a number of teachers who are traveling teachers. And, you know, so it's not like we have this plethora of space, but we do have some ability to get creative and carve out a really nice space.
We'll let Brad go, and then we'll just get all of our questions at the end.
Yeah.
I think to echo, what Michelle was talking about, you know, we're at the end of registration season, and as we talked back in, I think, November, when we brought the application forward, you know, our approach with students and registration has been very much allow them to register and build schedules around that. And, you know, in those presentations to them, explaining to them that we were talking about flexible scheduling, and we were looking at something different than the set model, and that there's classes that may fit better into that model. We are at about 60 students that have expressed interest in the Power School Board, but we know there's more interest in students. I've got a schedule that this class works, I'm interested in that. I think they're like us, we just don't know quite yet which classes, because we're going to magic and pull the groups of, in our case, groups of 3 courses that match up. So we have a culinary class, literature class, a Liz class, something along those lines. And so it is evolving. We did spend some time in our registration meeting, just for perspective, in our performance hall, that was always about a quarter full, and it was almost packed this year, which was a great turnout. I think, folks were interested in what was going on, and we heard overwhelmingly that the amount of choice was really positive. I don't know that meshes real well with the conversation we were just having with budgets and stuff about doing all the things we're doing on that, on the budgets we're working on, but the parents were just, I think, very appreciative of that. We were talking about what is right for your students. Those were real positive comments. We did what I would call in the weeds meeting with our department leaders, where we allowed, let's just start looking at some nuts and bolts and what would a schedule look like potentially for a teacher? What would a schedule look like for a student? What were some of the possible pitfalls? You know, we wanted to make sure we stayed within collective bargaining agreement issues. We wanted to make sure that programs could grow, even though we might be neutral in FTE. And you know, and German came up, that's one example in that, but I think within that international language department, for example, they are talking about ways they can use proficiency and grow their department and have more offerings, but still within what they're teaching. And this model may work with that. Maybe you're talking days and things along those lines. So I'm just really, really proud of some of the outside of the box thinking that our staff has done, knowing that we've got some parameters we have to work within. We have budget constraints. We have room issues, things like that we have to still live within. You know, and then as needed, kind of one-on-one with staff or with departments and problem solving, maybe what it looks like for them and which courses may work a little bit better. We've had some connection with Western because our model was based on what they were doing with their time. They've been fantastic. They're willing to help, you know, pair up our faculty with theirs and how you take a course and restructure it into a block. They've sent us, I know those are college classes, and that's not what we're only focusing on, but they've sent us some syllabi, some courses that we teach concurrently, so we can make some comparisons and take a look at some of that work. You know, and then just some feedback on how do you make that shift into teaching blocks. We have talked with FPCC as well, because I think it's important that their partnership and their summer experience they offer to students after their sophomores. It lives in this model already. They do some things that we kind of schedule. Mike Kelly with work-based learning, you know, he's been doing stuff where it's maybe a period a day for a semester or 2 periods. There's some internships that are better served for an afternoon for a shorter period of time, and so I think that flexibility and how this fits is important. And we really just want to be able to adjust to the things that, you know, there's going to be stuff that come up from a model that allows. I think we're finding that that's evolving. Talked about the go for 3 periods for 30 days, but there may be models where we're going to go double periods. There may be something where it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, where you have a Tuesday day where there could be an extended time for maybe a lab type of component. All of those things are in the works and will depend on which courses fit. I think that's the model. Okay. Space is to be determined to some degree. I expect us to live in the CTE world a little bit. Our pod is set up really well for that, and I think as we evolve, year one, I don't say that we're going to be all in one pod. I think that's probably an impossible task right now, but I could see us evolving down the road to where we have a pod in our building that is
operating within that, using that.
Just want to add a couple things. I mean, you guys have spent a tremendous amount of work, getting this up off the ground. You guys know that we didn't have a lot of time to be able to do it. But these guys recognize that this is a great opportunity, for our students. So as we work within the charter schools too, it's not like we're adding new FTE, we're adding, different things. There might be some shifts. I know within, Michelle, she does have an additional work-based learning, coordinator in there because that's the focus of what it is, but we will be pulling staff in. So in order to cover some of it, just like we're pulling the students, we don't know how much new A and B will capture off of this. I would imagine since it's new, very little. So we'll be pulling from those 80 students will be coming out of Flathead High School, and the 60 students that Brad has, will be coming out of their regular schedules to go into the charter schools. The same thing, we'll be identifying, an administrator that oversees it, so whether it's a partial FTE, what that looks like, the same way, with the staff. There are a lot of, unknowns. Chris has probably a million questions, and I'm not forget about it, we'll get there, so we'll get it worked out. No, but we've been trying to answer some of those questions with, just some of the other, business directors around the state and with the Board of Public Education. There is a lot to figure out, on this. I'm being pretty transparent and honest, but, there's also, 16, 17 other, schools that are basically in the same boat that are working through this. We're gonna rely on each other. In fact, we've reached out to Missoula, okay, how are you doing this? What are you doing? What questions do we need to ask? So, to be able to figure this out, I know this is gonna be a burden on Chris, he's 3 months into it. And the amazing work, that he's done. But I think he kind of has a plan for, just the heavy lift right at the beginning that this is gonna take so that we can move it forward and do it right. What I've said. Good, add something. Oh, you want to add something? Okay. Just what I've said is, if I didn't think we could do it, then we would pull the plug and we would hold on it. It's the same thing, we would have an opportunity, with the Board of Public Ed to say, hey, we're not quite sure about this. We're gonna put it on hold for a year. We know it's gonna be a lot of work. We're gonna work through it. And, we think that this is best for kids. It's what the legislature asked for, is to give parents more choice, to give students more choice. It aligns with a lot of the things that we're doing with PCBE. So, we're gonna move forward. Oh, unless you tell me different. Sorry.
Brad, did you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, echo a little bit. I don't think we've hit a point yet where we're like, we can't solve this problem if we've run into something. And that's been kind of a marker for us to say, we're gonna continue to move forward, and we've had questions and we've been able to address those. And I think even though we've gone through the registration process, it's important to know that continues on all spring. So as kids continue to become more educated about it, and we look at the scenario where you go, this might be a really good fit for you. We know that the numbers fluctuate. I expect to be more than 60. It's evolving, and it's not a.
On that issue, that 80, 41 is the magic number. That's something that as kids go through, they could say, now stay at Glacier. I'd like to get some confident, are we, that we're going to stay above that 41 count, which is necessary to get. And then second, is I'm hearing what it is that we're providing and what we're trying to provide that's different than what we do at present. And Michelle, I appreciate you what it is not, because that helped me understand it a little better. My question is more, is there a greater risk of falling behind or not staying current with such that it's so hard to how much of this really is an online class versus, anyway, those are all just the things floating through my mind, because I want to make sure we're providing, if we're going to take this on, I want to make sure we're providing a product.
And part of the charter application included how we would, I actually saw a school with a similar, that they delivered their core classes kind of right? And so, you know, that it's important to have those anchors. But our teachers are pretty comfortable building that flexible part of the class. You know, if we were doing this a year ago, we would not be, for us, the timing is right. Dabble in quarter during COVID, right? Our teachers had to have that as perspective. Really hold what's good about remote instruction. Have do the best blended.
When you look at ours, if you just break the numbers down and say 90 days in the semester for a period, we go 3 periods for 30 days. All our teachers in that flexibility within that 30 days to build does exactly what you're talking about. It does an instructional piece, it has a piece to ensure that it looks a little bit different from class to class. You know, class may look different. Giving them the flexibility to think differently than all 30 days for 3 hours. Or the ability to do those are examples of ways. Western, in our conversations with them, we start with a philosophy. You really do drill down to what is your priorities, which is a huge part of PCD, and your efficiency is so much greater than your normal time frame that you think you need. Or extension.
Progress kids are making. You know, I think we'll find in either model, there might be some kids for whom, right, we need to be able to have that, provide support, if it's still not working, and traditional probably.
Well, first I wanted to say it was so wonderful, Michelle, to hear you talking to parents about this, because the parents were excited, and it came across as, it seemed like, oh yeah, this is a thing that I could see myself wanting. Also, to both of you, to everybody involved, the speed that this is happening is insane. And that leads me into my question. We came and saw, we had our tour at Flathead, and you talked about some of the things, and it was like the next day was registration, and there were some unanswered questions about what constitutes a student of the charter school, and that question hadn't been answered yet. Like, how many periods do they need to be there? Can they go part-time and still be counted as a full student? There was just a lot of questions of how much a student needed to be in the program. Has any of that been answered by, like, OPI or any of the other places we were waiting for information from?
You need 41 A and B, and what's the period 5, what it constitutes, 4 periods a day.
Okay.
In order to equal 1 A and B. So, you know, throughout the year. You know, that was some questions that I put out to OPI too, is talking about it. And obviously, you know, the A and B all comes in arrears too. So basically what they're looking at as far as registration is, you know, what are your, you know, basically what are your projections you know, on that, you know, which makes it interesting. And then the other thing you have to understand is, you know, charter schools are different, and, you know, the Board of Public Education is gonna be a little bit more involved, you know, than say like, OPI is, because they want to have that relationship, you know, with the schools. So, you know, this is new for the state. They're gonna have to answer to, you know, the legislatures, how's this going, what's going on. So, you know, there is more reporting, but we just have to be a little bit more strategic about our reports and make sure we're breaking it out, you know, for each of the charter schools so that we can be reporting back. But they're gonna be checking in, they'll do, you know, site visits, for each of the charter schools, and then they'll show up unannounced, you know, so there are some requirements because they want that relationship.
Could one student do 2 periods and have half A and B, or it's 4 or nothing?
No, they would, it
So
would
if
count
one
just the same way that we count our A and B in
So a
in our
student
high
could go
schools.
2 periods, be half an A and B, and still be in the program. And then my next question is, you know, Jen had kind of said it, like, they're in the academy, they are also still within their home school. How does that work? Like, do they get both diplomas? What does that work like? Do we know any of those answers yet?
Well, Ursula, let me tell you that we tried to do some things in order. We needed to get through registration.
Yeah.
Questions still didn't answer, but
Yeah.
like, this was one of those like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna handle this when there's an assembly? How are
Yeah.
we gonna handle bus schedules? Like,
Yeah.
there's all those things that. I
Just
think
getting
once-
figured out still.
It will, we
Okay.
will get it all figured out.
Okay.
I think Linderman provides us a good
Okay.
model where.
It's a lot to figure out. You're doing a lot really fast. Okay.
So we've tried to.
Okay.
In order,
Okay.
what's next.
So I like, Michelle, that you said, it's a different way, not an easy way, but do you have things in place? Like, there are gonna be kids that are like, oh, I only have to go to school, like, for 2 days, and then I'm pretty free the rest of the time. Do you have things in place to kind of like recognize maybe the students that might try to take advantage of that, to kind of be like, maybe this isn't for you?
Yep, and as I said, just that monitoring. That whole system. We're ready to do that, and one of the ways it's been helpful for people to look at it, if you think about a traditional class where a kid gets a project to do, right? And, you know, maybe they get 4 days to do that project. Finishes in 1 day, does a good job, right? That happens. What does that kid in a traditional model do the other 3 days? They have to sit there, right? They have to sit there in that class, even though they really don't have anything to do because they're already done, right? This model will allow a kid to do that project that way, and then not have to sit.
Wouldn't the PCBE model also allow that kid to move on to do something else though?
Yeah, and, you know, so it's not, you can't totally, and this is what, you know, on the curriculum side, you can't totally self-pace it, right? Because then it would be like an online course, or, right? Like, so you have to figure out how to blend it. We know from our profile of a learner that things like communication are important. How do you do that if kids are, right? So recognize their needs.
And then my other question is for, like, we talked about in our last meeting, about how the rules kind of changed, and so any kid in any district can come to our school. Have we put it out there to, like, Whitefish, Columbia Falls, Big Fork? Are we seeing those kids interested in this?
I think we've had interest just on a general, you know, not, hey, I'm gonna come, and I'm gonna, you know, who knows?
But Jennifer, you have to also realize that, you know, we're going to open enrollment next year, so any student from any district can attend. You know, the charter schools, you know, part of it was, you know, if you're at capacity, then you have to go to a lottery system, You know, and that, I think I explained that, you know, was one of the reasons we didn't go look at doing LEC as a charter school. But, you know, as Brad and Michelle talked about, you know, we let the students decide with their feet, and then we staffed it, you know, appropriately. You know, we could have a cutoff, you know, at a certain time, and that'll go with, policy 3141 too. I think, you know, that's coming out, so it would fall under that, you know, same policy is, hey, once you have it, you had an opportunity to get in, but come August, sorry, we're full. You know, that works the same way with our high schools as it would with the charter schools. So I hope I answered that.
So I just have kind of two big questions here, really tethered to what we've been talking about tonight. About a tremendous amount of effort being put into these two charter schools, and first, I have, are these efforts and what's being required of us, is it detracting from our efforts towards PCB? I mean, we're investing a ton of teacher resources, time and effort. Now, putting this on top of them as well, I worry about that. This is funding neutral.
To answer your first question, you know, I believe that the charter schools, perfectly align with the work that we're doing with personalized competency-based education. I think it opens up more opportunities for students to do work-based learning. I think that it allows our students to get outside of the four walls even more. You know, and that's part of the goal for, personalized, competency-based education. I also want to note, you know, that this didn't come from the district office. You know, this came from the legislature. This was an opportunity. It wasn't, hey, Brad and Michelle, you guys need to apply for this. It was, you know, I think I made the comment when we were, talking to the Board of Public Ed. It's like, hey, we applied for it. You know, these guys knew, you know, what the work that was involved, you know, for the charter schools. They have a lot on their plate. You know, I commend them, you know, for doing that. But again, you know, and maybe I should let them talk, but, you know, they see opportunities for students, and they see opportunities for our staff, and they see opportunities for our school. And I think that's how we've always operated is, you know, what's in the best interest for students. Is it cost neutral? No. I'm hoping that, we're gonna be gaining, some off of the base. You know, that, you know, right now, you know, the last conversation we had from, McCall Flynn at, the Board of Public Ed, you know, for the base allocation, if you have 41 students, was $375,000, you know, per charter. I don't know if it'll be that much, you know, so we don't know exactly what the.
That's above the A and B, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The least cost.
So it'd be an additional, you know, $375,000 for each one is what they've said. You know, we're not banking on that, you know, we're kind of looking, you know, if we get, $200,000 or $300,000, you know, on the base, you know, by the time, that we get through this, we would be, you know, pretty happy. That would provide some relief, you know, on the high school side. You know, we wouldn't do this if we thought it was gonna add to our budget, because we already have some budget issues. So we're hoping that, you know, it helps us out budget, but it's terrible.
What I've been hearing is that it's the epitome of personalized learning, and that the teachers that'll be doing it are the ones that are leading personalized learning. So I don't think that it's taxing on them to prepare for it, but I think that enthusiasm level is there to make sure it works.
Well, I kind of feel like this is the perfect time.
Correct.
But where we're going with PCBE, with charter schools, it's all aligning. This is the direction we're heading. And I just feel like this is giving our students and parents more choice. Like you said, Brad, of opening up some stuff for our kids with internships. There are some hiccups right there. We've got a lot of kids who want to do some of these internships, and their scheduling, it doesn't work. We've got one of your students who's working with my husband, and when you're in the construction industry, when the kids are getting out at 3 and our guys are wrapping up at 4 o'clock, it's really hard for kids to be coming into the field. So giving them a little more flexibility. They need that. And this is, I mean, Mike is swamped. This is the direction we're going. That's not gonna go away. So I back this. I like this idea. I just think this is the route we're headed with our schools.
I'd add just in terms very much leading this work. Chris had asked about staff that were resistant to it earlier, and we have those. I mean, we do. We have some folks in our building that are asking. When you sit down and even talk about just the charter and what that looks like, you can bring it back to that, and they're like, oh, well, that makes sense. I see how that works. It's not this big idea out there that they can't wrap their arms around. So it's helped actually with some of our staff. And a little more questioning.
I would agree, it just kind of rallies them around, for us departmentally, right? We have to get this PACE class ready to go, right? And so it's kind of, at all levels of.
I think this is another big thing of unknown also, where you guys are working really hard, and I appreciate that, and it'll work itself out. My big concern when we were talking, we needed a minimum of 41, I wanted to know. I wanted to see those numbers and let the students lead of, is this something they're interested in? To me, the numbers speak volumes, so that's what I'm looking at.
Make a motion to approve Rising Wolf Charter School and Pace Academy.
Thank you, Krista. Do we have a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Lance. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
This is just to approve it, not necessarily
To approve the contract.
the discussion going to have it has been.
Well, that's the contract that came out from the Board of Public Education.
But
The NTSBA is accepted.
Right.
so it actually went through, it came from the Board of Ed, and then it got kicked around with the AA superintendents, and it went through a different law firm in Montana, and they proposed a round of edits, and the Board of Ed made those edits. And so this is at least the second version of the contract, but it has seen a legal review.
And it's kind of a take it.
Yeah.
The hesitation I have with contracts are the renewal and how it gives, and it does to these new charter schools. So to keep, we're gonna have far more oversight from the Board of Ed. We're running into enrollment issues and we go, gosh, we're below, not getting this added financial. Those are the concerns I have, as far as our ability to drive the direction we go, once we get in.
Valid
Fair.
concern. It's a valid concern.
We still have the opportunity to pass on this current year, right, with the contract approved.
But similar to the point you just made, the language is a little vague on if we pass on it, if we still maintain the right to, without another application next year, to be able to take it. There's some question about whether or not if we pass on this opportunity, we just go back into the mix for review again next year, or if we would have the opportunity to just pick it up where we left it.
I guess I'm just not want the board to have its eyes wide open. Our bargaining power under this contract lower than the level of oversight over. Than what we have over, say, Black. And I think that's intentional and intended by.
Are you two okay with that? Yeah. You feel confident?
Any further discussion? Any public comment on this? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Brad and Michelle.
Yes, thank you, Brad and Michelle.
Oh, good.
Now it's official, so you get to iron out all the details.
Yep, it's exciting, terrifying.
I'm glad that you both seemed, I was a little worried there at the end with those last questions. I was like, do they actually want to do this? So I'm glad you're excited. I'm glad you're excited.
Okay. Back to miss the end of that in the vote. We've approved the charter school.
Good.
Okay, that's good. Okay, up next, we had, on the agenda, MTSBA policy update. It was a discussion and information item that, Randy was gonna be discussing, but we're gonna table it for our next meeting, so we can get some clarification on things.
Do you need a motion to table it?
There's no, it's not.
I think it's just because it's a
Okay.
discussion item, we're okay. Okay, up next, Liz, you're finally up. Personnel action items.
I move to approve.
No, let's.
Hopefully everybody looked at it. Okay, it's been motion made by Jack, seconded by Krista. Any discussion on this? None. Any public comment? None.
Do we anticipate more people retiring?
No,
March 1 is the deadline, so this is it.
not under the incentive.
Today, at noon, the incentive expired, so anyone who's going to. So we have 6 high school and 5 elementary.
Or she was retiring?
Might have been on last board meeting.
Okay, gotcha.
There's a little bit more than half is on the previous.
Any further discussion? None. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Up next.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Lance. Do I have
I'll
a
second it. I'll second it.
Elementary only.
Yeah.
No, mine
I-
isn't.
Lance and Ursula
I will second
seconded
it, yeah.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none. Public comment? Seeing none. Elementary only. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Jack, do
So
you want to
moved.
make a motion? Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Krista. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Ben?
9:28, I did it to you, so it's again, on the agenda item.
That's okay, that's
Sorry.
You warned us.
Is there anyone here to speak about the resiliency club? I was reading the application and I really just don't understand what it is and what it does, and maybe we as a board routinely may not understand what they are and what they do, and we approve them, and maybe, but I'm just,
It's actually, it's a non-curricular club, so you don't approve them.
okay.
So actually, it's just an informational item on there for you, so I approve
That helps me understand, because
He'd already stamped it.
I was confused, and I'll just, okay, stay in that way.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right, the next one, upcoming meetings. Our next, we have 2 board meetings in March. We will hold the meeting on the 12th. The meeting on the 26th is during spring break. We will be canceling that meeting. Also, next week, we have a personnel committee meeting. That time has changed. If anybody's planning on attending that meeting, it's usually at 3. We've moved it to 10. Other than that, that's all I've got.
What is the date of the meeting? Is that the meeting?
Well, you guys were talking, you missed it. No, I'm just kidding. It's the 26th, we canceled.
No,
I do have a question on, with, Lloyd not being on the board, there are some vacancies in the committees. Did you assign people to all of those?
So the only committee, we have enough, board members on each committee to run just fine for the
Okay.
rest of the remainder of the school year.
Do we need to appoint Lance to be the chair of the policy committee?
No, you don't.
No.
For 2 months?
No. Ursula said she
Sorry,
could fill in
Yeah,
on
I'll
that
fill in on the
committee
policy
if needed.
Okay.
But I think you guys are okay. There's not a whole lot that's coming up. I've already spoken with Randy about it.
I was planning on going to the policy one. I didn't know if you'd wanted me to go to any other ones or anybody else to go to any
Nope,
other one.
we've looked it over
Finance, you
and
can go to finance at 7:30 on Friday.
I know
we are
I
good.
don't do finance.
Hey, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Oh, you can give it to her.
Okay, Jen,
I will second it.
okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Uh,
Aye.